Are there any objections to the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill being read a second time? I hear there's a yes. Given that there are objections, I now put the question. Those in favor will say aye. And those against, no. I think the ayes have it.
Speaker,
Honorable Waters.
the DA calls for division. Thank you.
The DA calls for a division, and therefore the bells will be rung for 5 minutes. Honorable members, I would like to remind members that they may only vote from their allocated seats. When requested to do so, members must simply indicate their vote by pressing the appropriate button below the yes, no, or abstain signs. If a member inadvertently presses the wrong button, the member may thereafter press the correct button. The last button pressed will be recorded as the member's vote when the voting session is over. Order. The question before the House is that the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill be read a second time. Are all members in their allocated seats? Yes. Voting will now commence. Those in favor of the bill being read a second time should press the yes button. Yes. Those against should press the no button. Those wishing to abstain, press the abstain button. Have all honorable members voted? Thank you. The voting session is now closed.
Honourable Speaker, on the point of order.
What is the
Honourable
point of
Matisha
order?
has come in when the voting was in progress. I don't know who.
Who was that?
Honourable Matisha.
Honorable Madisha? Yes. He came into the House while the voting session was on. Yes. But the doors are supposed to be locked.
He came in.
But then his vote cannot be counted.
Also, Honourable Speaker.
Yes, Honorable Khatebe.
I see also the lady behind Honourable Makaula also came in when the doors were closed.
The lady behind who? Behind Honorable Kaula.
Madam Speaker,
Order. Yes, Honorable Steenhuisen.
Madam Speaker, once the bells have rung and they've ended running, the doors are supposed to be locked. Now you're the presiding officer, the buck stops with you.
Yes.
Can you please get your voting system under control?
And there's, listen, they are saying even the lady behind Kaula. Which party is that?
Speaker. Speaker.
minus lalela ubani lo sisi osemva kukamama uPhawula? Naye bathi, why is he part?
Speaker, can we help you?
Okay, how are they voting?
Speaker, maybe we can put people with dooms there at the door. Then the doors will be shut properly.
Honorable Ndlozi, I want to announce the results of the division.
On a point of order.
Okay. I would like to finish off the voting session before I proceed with any point, even a point of order.
I'm raising a point of order on the voting process itself.
Honorable Shibambu, I want to announce the results.
But I want to raise a point of order on
Honorable
the voting itself.
Shibambu, please take your seat and allow me to
But
proceed.
Speaker, the rules allow me to raise
Take
a
your
point
seat,
of order.
Honorable Shibambu. Don't argue with me.
But how do you operate? But we're raising a point of order which is allowed.
Honorable Shibambu, I want to finish off the voting session.
But I'm raising a point of order on the process itself.
Honorable Shibambu, take your seat. I'm not allowing you.
But Honorable Speaker, you took the ANC Wipari, you took the DA Wipari. What's the problem with recognizing us?
Honorable members, I would
Honorable Speaker, but you are out of order.
Honorable Ndlozi.
No,
take
you
your seat.
took other members
Take
to
your
raise
seat.
point of orders. Why are you not taking us?
Take your seat.
No, I'm asking, can you recognize our chief whip? We want to raise a point of order. They raised 3 point of orders. He raised 1. We want to raise a point of order as well. How can you not be argued with? You are a human being. We must argue with you as well. If you are doing something wrong, we must help you. Can you recognize us?
Honorable members, I'd like to announce the voting results. The yes minus Honorable Madisha is 228. The no minus the honorable member that came after the door had been pushed open by honorable members from outside is 86. Abstain, 0. Those are the results of the voting. And therefore, the question is accordingly agreed to, and the secretary will read the bill a second time.
Division of Revenue Amendment Bill.
The bill will now be sent to the National Council of Provinces for concurrence.
Madam Speaker,
The secretary
Madam
will
Speaker.
read the second order.
Madam Speaker,
The Honorable Steenhuisen.
Madam Speaker, I can't, you've switched off my microphone.
You've censored us already. You're coming off the National Party.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to address you in terms of Rule 26.4, if I may, read together with 26.3. You're required as a Speaker by the rules to act fairly and impartially and to apply the rules with due regard to ensuring the participation of members of all parties in a manner consistent with democracy. You have violated that rule this morning by not allowing the Honourable Member, the Chief Whip of the EFF, to raise his point of order. May I also bring it to your attention, since we're on the matter of rules, that you may only turn off the microphone after you have informed the member that you're going to do it. You have breached that, and you yourself are in breach of the rules that you're supposed to be upholding. Can you please try and at least maintain some semblance of impartiality?
Honorable Steenhuisen. Honorable Steenhuisen, the one thing I will not do is allow honorable members to shout at the chair. I will not allow that. You, Honorable Steenhuisen, you are shouting even right now. Order. Order, honorable members, the secretary will read the second
On a
order.
point of order, Speaker.
Consideration
Speaker,
of
on a
report
point
of
of
Portfolio
order.
Committee on Justice and Correctional Services on Protected Distinguished
Baleka, on a point
Amendment
of
Bill.
order. Baleka Mbete, can you please recognize me? Because I'm calling you Speaker, you're not recognizing me. What is your problem?
I now, honorable members, recognize the honorable, the
Can I
chief
raise
whip
on a
of the
point
majority
order,
party.
please?
Speaker,
Can I raise on a point of order?
Speaker, there's a
Chair, I
point of
move
order
that
here.
the report
You've
of
got to
the committee
recognise
be
the honourable
adopted
member.
by this
Can
House.
I raise on a point of order?
Can't just ignore members. You're worse than the National Party.
I'm raising on a point of order. It's legitimate in terms of the rules of Parliament.
Honorable members, when you rise and shout in the House, all you do
But I'm raising my hand here.
is reveal who you are and what you are. If you are an honorable member, you will raise your hand
I'm raising my hand. On
while
point of
you are on your seat.
order. I'm raising my hand now.
The Honorable Shibambu.
Mrs. Baleka Mbete, I want to bring you to attention that in terms of Rule 112 on the voting procedure, it says, you must read along when I read. It says, if the required number of members support the demand for a division, the division bells must be rung and the doors must be barred as soon after the lapse of 5 minutes, as the presiding officer may direct. But if further decisions are required to dispose of the question and such divisions follow immediately upon the division bells must again be rung and the doors must be barred as soon as the lapse of 15 minutes. In principle, is that when the bells have been rung, the doors must be closed. If they were not closed, there are more than 4 people who entered there effortlessly. No one pushed the door to enter there. Our TG entered there without having to push anyone. And Honorable Madisha entered there without having to push anyone. The other member entered there without having to push anyone. So the voting process that we have just engaged in now is not in accordance with the rules of the National Assembly. And I wanted to bring that to attention before the voting happens, because you could have done it again and do it in an appropriate manner. So the manner in which the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill has been passed now is not consistent with the rules, is therefore illegal. That is what I'm bringing to attention. I'm helping you, but you're not recognizing me. I don't know where the sickness comes from.
Thank you, Honorable Shibambu. I'd like to bring it to your attention that we did get a report about what happened at the door. And on that basis of that report, we removed from the count the honorable members who had come in by pushing their way through the door. And therefore, we counted what is in accordance with the rules and have since announced the result accordingly. Thank you very much. I now put the motion that the report be adopted. Are there any objections?
Yes, there are objections, and we call for division.
A division has been asked for. I now put the question. Those in favor will say aye. Those against, no. I think the ayes have it. But I have been told that you are asking for an objection and therefore and a division. So the bells will be rung for 2 minutes. Order. The motion is that the report be adopted. That is the report on Protected Disclosures Amendment Bill. Are all members in their allocated seats? Voting will now commence. Those in favor of the report should press the system. I'm told the system is not working, Honorable Mr. Mahlangu. All right. Those in favor of the report being adopted should press the yes button. Those against should press the no button. Those wishing to abstain should press the abstain button. Have all members voted? Thank you. The voting session is now closed. Honorable members, the results are as follows. The yes, 302. The no, 24. And abstain, 1. And therefore, the report has been adopted.
Honourable Speaker.
Honorable Singh.
Yeah, thank you. Nkosi Kebekulu is not in the House, he's unwell, but the member pressed his button incorrectly. So if we could delete Nkosi Kebekulu from having voted on the last one.
Okay, please delete Nkosi Kebekulu. And therefore that would change the yes to 301 if Nkosi Kebekulu would have voted yes. Honorable Steenhuisen.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to address you in terms of Rule 92(5), if I may. I took 2 points of order. The one relating to the breach of the breaking of the seal of the door, but the second related to Rule 80, 1 and 2, which deals with your control of the microphones in the House. Now, you switched off the Honourable Ndlozi and my microphone was off, so I couldn't actually take a proper point of order just now. May I ask you to please make a ruling in terms of Rule 82, in that you can only switch off if there's grossly disorderly conduct. You can't just switch off at your whim. And that before proceeding, the presiding officer must inform the member and the House of the intention to do so. You did neither, and I would submit that the behavior of Honourable Ndlozi was not, did not breach Section 81. And I would like you to make a ruling. I'd like you to make a ruling on the matter.
Thank you, Honorable Steenhuisen. I will deal with that matter. I'm right now. Honorable members, we are now dealing with the Honorable Ndlozi.
Honorable Speaker, I want us to deal with this question of rising. Because we're not in a school class here. We can't raise our hands, and sometimes you won't see all of us. So what do the rules say when you have a point of order? Do they say that I must raise my hand or I must rise? Rule 92. A member may raise a point of order at any time during the proceedings of the House in terms of the procedure prescribed in the Rule 60 by standing. By stating that he or she is raising on a point of order. I'm going to read it again. A member may raise a point of order at any time during the proceedings of the House in terms of the procedure prescribed in Rule 66 by stating that he or she is rising on a point of order. That's all I have to do. I have to state that I have a point of order, not raise my hand.
Thank you, Honorable
Can you
Ndlozi.
stop that thing, because you are going to
Honorable
frustrate and
Ndlozi,
collapse this House.
Take the seat now.
Otherwise, I'm bringing doom tomorrow.
You have finished making your point, and I will indeed also state my issue on that point. The Secretary will now read the
Madam
third
Speaker.
order of the day.
Madam Speaker, a point of order.
What's the point of
The
order?
point of order is in terms of Rule 92.5. You're required to make a ruling or indicate to me that you're going to come back to me with a considered
Yes.
ruling. On a simple matter like this, you require a
Yes,
considered ruling.
Honorable Steenhuisen.
Well, I look forward to your response.
Second reading debate, Protected Disclosures Amendment Bill.
I now recognize Honorable Mutsecha.
Honorable Speaker, the bill was referred to the committee, and the committee publicized it, held public hearings, and when it came before the committee for deliberation, all parties agreed, with the exception of the EFF, which reserved its position because their member was not participating in the deliberations. There is only one clause where the ACDP and the DA disagreed, and that was whether or not we should criminalize false information. And that disagreement revealed a jurisprudential difference because they emphasize individual rights without accepting that individual rights must be balanced with duties and responsibilities. So our position which prevailed is that whistleblowers must have the right to give information. But we live in a society where the morals are very low, where some individuals may want to settle personal scores against others. And therefore, our view was that we need to say those who give false information, which may damage individuals, their families, their friends, should be prosecuted. And that is the balance that we sought to create between rights and duties. And we believe that in our legal system, we must entrench the position that there are no absolute rights. All rights must be accompanied by duties and responsibilities. And we are pleased that this position has prevailed, and that's why this House overwhelmingly supported this bill. I thank you, Honourable Speaker.
The Honourable Horn.
Thank you, Speaker. Corruption can be described as a snake, poisonous, sly and deceptive. When Chief Justice Mogoeng in the now famous Nkandla judgment talked about the mighty sword that stands ready to chop off the ugly head of impunity, I'm sure most of us in the eyes of our minds saw this ugly head to be at the end of a slithering snake. The Swazi people wisely say, never beat a snake when you haven't seen its head. So for us in South Africa to be able to see the ugly head of corruption and fight it successfully, the protection of whistleblowers is of crucial importance. Since 2000, we have had the necessary law to protect whistleblowers in South Africa. This framework has been lauded both locally and internationally, but unfortunately, we have seen a consistent decline in the number of internal tip-offs because of the weaknesses in this system. Speaker, these weaknesses are addressed in this amendment bill by strengthening the provisions preventing those making accurate disclosures from being mistreated at their place of employment, while protection is also extended beyond the formal employment situation. All good initiatives. But, Speaker, while not proposed by the South African Law Reform Commission, and despite overwhelmingly not being supported during the public hearings, this bill states that henceforth, if someone makes an intentional disclosure of information known to be false, or which reasonably should have been known to be false, such a false whistleblower will be guilty of a crime. The ANC will argue today that this criminalization clause is necessary to deter the immoral people of South Africa from making false disclosures, as it could cause major reputational damage to victims. But, Speaker, false disclosures are not and have never been protected by our law, which means that false whistleblowers could be subjected to disciplinary action, even dismissal, and civil claims. According to the ANC, though, this is not enough. False whistleblowing, they argue, as we have heard, is so serious that those found guilty must even be sent to jail. Despite the fact, Speaker, that at no stage during the public hearings were we informed of huge-scale abuse of whistleblowing. In fact, we were only informed of the hardships faced by whistleblowers in our country. Like Zola Banisi, who worked at Bloemwater, a parastatal operating in the Free State. He handed the Hawks a dossier detailing the corruption in respect of 2 tenders he uncovered. In response, he was sidelined and then transferred. He reported receiving death threats to the police, but still no action was taken. In September 2014, he was murdered by being shot 3 times. Up to today, nobody has been arrested for his murder. Sadly, Speaker, this is but one of many similar stories detailed in a booklet of the Open Democracy Advice Centre, ODAC, on this issue. The ANC will later in this debate point out that we will not be the first country to criminalise disclosure of false information. They will name countries like Kenya, Canada and Australia as those who have already criminalised. What they of course will not tell us is that in these countries, criminalisation is limited to very specific and narrow circumstances, where false information is disclosed recklessly or in some cases maliciously, while knowing the information to be false. So what we will be the first country to do is to criminalize disclosure of information which was mistakenly but honestly believed to be true. Does that sound moral? We will be placing a duty on prospective whistleblowers to first investigate and verify whether the information they have and which they believe could point to wrongdoing is in fact true before blowing the whistle. Failure to verify properly will be seen as unreasonable, negligent, and therefore criminal. Speaker, this is a test for blameworthiness, much more onerous and open to skewed interpretation than in the rest of the world. The ANC will come and try to deflect attention away from this fatal flaw in this bill by arguing that the criminalization clause requires intentional disclosure. But a proper interpretation of this clause shows that what is required is merely the intention to make a disclosure. The requirement of intent does not apply to the accuracy or lack thereof of the information disclosed. If we further bear in mind the evidence of ODAC, who has since 2000 operated a whistleblowers helpline in our country, it must become clear that this bill will have a chilling effect on whistleblowing. They say the majority of those calling in for advice do not even know whether the information they contemplate disclosing is true or necessarily constitute wrongdoing. That's exactly the reason why they want to disclose it, for it to be investigated by others. So then, colleagues, why would the ANC not be swayed on this issue? Is it maybe because your president is on record as believing that corruption is a Western concept, and that even if it is a crime, it's a victimless crime, and therefore not serious? Is it maybe because you all agree with the Honourable Pilane Majaki, who in committee exclaimed, "There's just so many made-up stories about corruption in South Africa today. It's really bad for nation building." Why mustn't we conclude, Speaker, that the stance of President Zuma's ANC on this is to blow the whistle on this made-up thing called corruption is really disloyal to the struggle, the ruling party, and Africa? Let's also consider the following findings of the Institute for Policy Research in Namibia. In July this year, it said, whistleblower protection laws can be little more than an attempt at window dressing, creating the illusion of protection, but which is actually only a form of gesture politics, attempting to mask a lack of real commitment to fighting corruption. To which it ominously added, by overemphasizing punishments for reporting false information, governments sometimes attempt to warn off potential whistleblowers by creating fears that the law could be used to victimize those it's supposed to protect. Speaker, this reminds of another African proverb which says, Sabetsa seo o senang, sonakaletsoang leao, seka se bolaya noa. Which means, of course, a weapon which you don't have in your hand won't kill a snake. This bill will, in ANC terms, radically transform our whistleblowing protection framework from a sword with rusty steel blades into a plastic sword. It will deter not only false whistleblowing, but all whistleblowing. Speaker, die kriminalisering van vletjieblassers wat foutiewelik glo dat die inligting wat hulle bekend maak korrek is, gaan verrykende negatiewe gevolge vir die stryd teen korrupsie in ons land hê. Die risiko om vervolg, skuldig bevind en selfs tronk toegestuur te word, omdat jy die regte ding wou doen en inligting bekend gemaak het, wat jy verkeerdelik maar bona fide geglo het waar is, bo op die risiko van victimisering, intimidasie, benadeling en selfs fisiese leed by jou werkplek, gaan waarskynlik veroorsaak dat ons vletjieblaaswetgewing voortaan mense eerder gaan afskrik as aanmoedig om korrupsie te help bloot lê. En hoewel dit jammer is om te moet sê, lyk dit vir ons of dit presies is wat die ANC wil hê. Ek dank u.
The Honourable Matthias.
Madam Speaker, the EFF believes that the bill is essentially an opportunity for Parliament to remedy some of the defects in the existing legislation, which we have seen the negative impact of first-hand in the experiences of whistleblowers. The EFF welcomes the intent of the Protected Disclosures Amendment Bill to protect whistleblowers from abuse and exploitation at workplaces. Regrettably, this is a lost opportunity to correct those defects because as for the ruling ANC, the intention was never to correct things, but to insert proposed changes in the bill to protect not the public and the whistleblowers, but its corrupt leadership and the so-called cadre deployees. The bill is another attempt by the ANC government to bring back through the back door its failed bid to introduce the Protection of State Information Bill, otherwise called Secrecy Bill, promoting a culture and of operating under the stealth of darkness and secrecy, of lack of transparency and punishing whistleblowers, for which that works for the ANC. The Protectors Disclosures Amendment Bill is a protection of state information by a different name. It's Secrecy Bill by other means. On face value, it looks genuine, but it's not so. It presents to pull another proverbial wool on the eyes of unsuspecting citizens whilst building a thick layer of secrecy to protect the incumbent government corruption from being exposed. The bill does not promote the most needed institutional culture of reporting wrongdoings in both the private and public sector, where in which whistleblowers play a vital role as actors in the fight against corruption, combating state capture, fraud, and exposing wrongdoers in our collective effort to safeguard and deepen our democracy. This lack of protection for such matters will prevent many employees from airing out suspicion of corruption, because should those be later proven to be untrue, employees will be left vulnerable. This defeats the whole purpose of the bill. It will prevent people in Mrs. Ngesi's department from exposing the corruption that follows the construction of Mr. Zuma's castle of corruption in Kandla, because they know Mr. Zuma has access to state funds to get the best lawyers in the land to hide his corruption. This will also prevent people who know the underhandedness dealings of Mr. Van Rooyen and the Guptas, because they know that these chaps are masters of corruption. They don't leave documentary evidence.
Honorable Matiase, please take your seat.
I'm rising on Rule 85, where the member was referring that the president is corrupt, whereas there's no court of law which found him to be corrupt. So it's violating Rule 85, personal casting identity, aspersions on the dignity of the...
Honorable Matiase, as you know, you can't do that. You are supposed to submit that in a substantive motion, so please withdraw.
I've never refused to Mr. Zuma as corrupt. It will offer very little protection,
Honorable Matiase,
as well as
I
for
ask
those
you
in the
to-
know about how.
Honorable Matiase, please withdraw.
I withdraw.
Okay.
It will offer very little protection, as well as for those in the know about how the Gupta has been milking ESCOM through deals made in Shebeens with Brian Melefe. The ANC, for its past desperate attempts to undermine the rights of whistleblowers by its insistence to pass the foiled Protection of State Information Bill, cannot be trusted and therefore incapable of being a trusted embodiment of the values and principles enshrined in our Constitution. If it deserves our trust, the ruling ANC must compel Mr. Zuma, since he publicly stated that he knows names of people in his government who steals the taxpayers' money, to reveal such names. Failing which, Mr. Zuma will once again be breaching his oath of office and effectively declaring himself an accomplice by failing to report such heinous crimes committed against the people of South Africa. Because of these and many other reasons, the Economic Freedom Fighters reject this bill in its current form.
The Honorable Msimang.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The IFP endorses the viewpoint in the National Development Plan that the protection of whistleblowers is a key to a strong and resilient anti-corruption system, and also its criticism that the protection accorded to whistleblowers in the Protected Disclosures Act is inadequate. This view reiterated the observation by Parliament soon after the passing of the Act, which prompted it to request the South African Law Reform Commission to investigate certain aspects of the Act. On its investigation, the Commission focused on the following. 1, extending the ambit of the Act beyond the traditional employer-employee relationship. 2, creating a new remedy for an employee who has been victimized by an employer in contravention of the Act. And 3, granting an employee who makes a protected disclosure immunity from criminal and civil liability. All these have found their way into this bill, which grants the provider of protected disclosure immunity from criminal and civil liability in certain circumstances and criminalizes intentional false disclosure. There are concerns, however, that making an offense to intentionally disclose false information may discourage whistleblowing. However, it must be borne in mind that a human being is not infallible and is prone to malicious motives, making it easy for him or her to render false information to satisfy his or her evil intentions. After all, a whistleblower is not much different from a referee in sport. It is common cause that many sportsmen, sportswomen occasionally fall victim to deviant referees who penalize them well knowing that they are innocent. This deviant human judgment often emanates from bias, jealousy, vindictiveness, or any other malicious motive. The innocent victim of such reference deserves to be protected to maintain the balance. And the errant whistleblower should not enjoy any protection under the law. In actual fact, there is quite a number of countries which provide in their protected disclosure legislation clauses which make it an offense to knowingly render false information. This should be more desirable in South Africa, where our society is prone to taking the law into their own hands and where many are inclined towards racial hatred and vengeance. A remedy against the prejudice inflicted by such people is imperative. The IFP supports the bill. I thank you.
The Honorable Mwabe.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, Honorable Members. The corruption and fraud is wreaking havoc in our economy and has reached endemic proportions within government. Within this context, the NDP identifies the protection of whistleblowers as a cornerstone for a strong and resilient anti-corruption system. 3 important deficiencies were identified in the existing Protected Disclosure Act. And the response to these deficiencies are contained in the bill tabled here for consideration today, and the NFP fully supports the remedial amendment. The bill, however, also creates an offense in the case of a false disclosure. This is a potentially contentious issue, particularly since it is in stark contrast to the Law Reform Commission recommendations as far back as 2007, that where an employee or a worker knowingly makes a false disclosure, such disclosure should not be criminalized. The reason for such a recommendation is purely logical. A deliberate act of false disclosure is not a protected disclosure. It is a deliberate, malicious, and untrue allegation. Accordingly, a person making such a false accusation and does not qualify for protection within the ambit of the Act. Only a bona fide protected disclosure qualifies the person making the disclosure for a protection in terms of the Act. Whilst we understand the concern about deliberate and false disclosure, the NFP is of the opinion that sufficient remedies exist in civil law to address the issue. A person making a false disclosure might be found guilty of a criminal defamation, crimen injuria, or fraud at common law, which all have established sanctions and remedies in law. In conclusion, Speaker, despite our concerns about criminalization of a deliberate false disclosure, will, however, support the recommendations of the committee contained here today. Thank you.
The Honorable Mulder.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I would like to start off by congratulating the Executive for rescuing the legislator today when 50 of your members helped us to succeed to approve the appropriation bill for after the third try. Congratulations. Chairperson, I was wondering if the founders of the Republic in 1994 foresaw what is happening in South Africa at the moment. There's no doubt that corruption is rife. Fraud is everywhere. We all know that. We've just heard the latest figures. The jobless rate has hit a 13-year high of 27.1%. And because of that, whistleblowers are very much needed in South Africa. And we all know in terms of this bill that the problem lies with criminalizing whistleblowers under certain circumstances. The Honourable Machega in his speech referred only to that specific clause because that is the contentious part.
What does it mean?
It's absolutely essential that we try to motivate people to come to the fore in terms of corruption and in terms of fraud. And I think it's wrong if you in any way put in a bill that deals with that, a provision that criminalizes and says to people, you're welcome to come forward, but you run the risk of going to prison for 2 years. I think it's wrong. I don't think we should do that. Just look at what happened in terms of the state capture situation. The ANC had their own internal investigation, and only a few people were prepared to come forward because maybe they were afraid that they may be victimized. Then the public protector took a completely different approach, and we all know what came out of that report. Something completely different. Die agbare hoorn het verwys na die ANC-lid Pilane Mayake se uitsprake rondom die hele kwessie wat sy in die komitee gesê het. En dit is nogal ontstellend, maar dit is nie 'n druppel so erg soos die uitsprake wat sy daarna gemaak het met betrekking tot die vervolgingsgesag nie, maar ons sal daarmee handel wanneer ons kom by die spesiale debat op die 29ste November, wanneer dit daaroor gaan. Die feit van die saak is, fluitjieblassers, soos dit reeds is onder enorme druk om nie na vore te kom nie, want ons sien ons wat gebeur. Die agbare lid van die EFF het gesê, maybe a whistleblower is like a referee in sport. No, it's not. Because the problem quite often lies with the referee itself. A whistleblower is more likely the third empire, the TV empire, where you can have a slow motion replay of what happened and then see exactly what went wrong. Fluitjieblassers behoort aangemoedig te word, nie gedreig te word met 'n kriminele moontlike vervolging en 2 jaar gevangenisstraf nie. In ons reg is daar voldoende ander maatreëls wat dit kan hanteer in terme van dissiplinêre aksies, in terme van lastereise ensovoorts. Die Vryheidsfront Plus sal nie hierdie wetgewing ondersteun nie. Baie dankie.
The Honourable Pongo.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Honourable Ministers and Deputy Ministers, Members of Parliament, members in the gallery, and South Africans at large. The ANC-led government reaffirms its commitment to protect whistleblowers. We've done that by signing or rectifying 2 international treaties, inter alia, the African Union Convention on Prevention and Combating of Corruption, which require member states to adopt measures that ensures that citizens report instances of corruption, both in the public and in the private domain, without a fear of reprisal. The second one was the South African Development Community Protocol, which commits member states to create, maintain, and strengthen the systems of protecting individuals who in good faith report acts of corruption. The government medium-term strategic framework 2014 to 2019 requires the Department of Justice to strengthen the protection of whistleblowers by amending the Protected Disclosures Act 26 of 2000. This bill before us is a South Africa's key law dedicated towards protecting whistleblowers in South Africa. It offers a broad protection to employees in the public sector and in the private sector. We are responding to the continued reported victimization, harassment, discrimination, and adverse threat to whistleblowers. The Protected Disclosure Amendment Bill extends its application of a Protected Disclosure Act beyond the traditional employer-employee relationship. The bill now requires employers to put appropriate internal procedures in place to deal with the information received from the whistleblowers. Furthermore, the employers must keep employees and workers about the outcomes of the investigation. This bill also extends the number of agencies to whom the protected disclosure can be made in good faith. These include the Public Service Commission. We have included the Public Service Commission because of its significant management of the anti-corruption hotline. And we wish to say that the role that is being played by the Public Service Commission needs to be strengthened going forward. It is important, Honorable Speaker, to draw a strict balance between a legitimate protection of whistleblowers, which may have to be balanced with protecting the business interest of the business people that may hamper the proper running of those businesses. It's also important to deal with unfounded allegations which are normally reported by people who want to sabotage other people's business. We need to make sure that in this bill we protect their confidentiality in as far as possible. We have put serious consequences for false disclosure in this bill for people who may want to damage the reputation of other people. In this submission that we're bringing before Parliament, we've got a support from the Bank Association of South Africa. They have welcomed that we need to protect false disclosure. We have done a thorough consultation with a lot of countries, among others. It was India, which has a similar provision which honorable members are complaining about. We have also consulted with Namibia. The Namibia Corruption Acts make the similar provisions that we have already put or inserted in this bill. The Protected Disclosure Amendment Bill is another example of the ANC government continued commitment to assist those who in good faith expose corruption and other criminal activities. To the people of this country, we would like to say that come 2019, vote for the African National Congress, because it's the only organization which has a track record of changing the lives of the people of South Africa for the better and make the people of South Africa their own liberators. Thank you very much, Speaker.
The Honorable Swart.
Thank you, Speaker. In view of the widespread fraud and corruption and wrongdoing in both the public and private spheres, the ACDP supports increased protection for whistleblowers. Now more than ever, it is crucial for ordinary South Africans to stand up against fraud and corruption. Many whistleblowers, however, have lost their jobs, livelihoods, homes, their families, and even their lives. Why then would the ACDP oppose this bill that seeks to increase protection? While we welcome the wider definition and the increase in the list of institutions to which accounts can be made, we share the concerns about the chilling effect that the newly instituted crime will have on potential whistleblowers. Now, according to the memorandum, it says that this is to protect reputational damage to the employer. But what about the workers? Surely we need to protect the workers. Now, the Open Democracy Advice Center, which is acknowledged internationally as being the leaders on this field, strongly advised against the criminalization. They said this will discourage workers from exposing wrongdoing, and this grassroots advice the committee ignored. Now remember, this criminal sanction will apply where a whistleblower ought reasonably to have known that the information is false. This is a form of mere negligence that can lead to criminalization. ODAC also advised us that many potential whistleblowers are not quite sure whether some wrongdoing has occurred when they phone for advice. They will now have to be advised that they risk not only one, of not being protected under this Act, 2, facing possible disciplinary action and being suspended or fired. 3, civil action for defamation. 4, criminal action for defamation. And 5, 9 terms of this act, a new criminal sanction in terms of this amendment bill. We are not saying from our side that those who intentionally spread false information must not be punished. What we are saying is there is sufficient other civil and criminal remedies already in place. The new crime will serve as a red flag, and surely we should not impose it. It is not in the international best practice. The SA Law Reform Commission did not recommend it, and when we drafted this act in 2000, I was there, we did not put in a criminal sanction. Why are we putting it in now? Our other whistleblowing legislation, NEMA, the Companies Act, does not contain such a criminal sanction. Why are we not amending those acts as well if we are now want to deter whistleblowers? The inclusion of this crime against the advice of experts who've worked on this, against the SA Law Reform Commission's advice, against our other laws on whistleblowing, leads one to the inescapable conclusion that the majority party does not want to protect workers who blow the whistle, particularly in the public sphere. And for that reason, the ACDP, whilst supporting the other issues in this bill, will not support this bill. Thank you very much.
The Honorable Pilane Machake.
Honorable Speaker, members of Parliament, members of the Executive, members of the public present here today, the National Development Plan identifies the protection of whistleblowers as key to a strong and resilient anti-corruption system. The main protection given to whistleblowers is found in the Protected Disclosures Act number 26 of 2000. The NDP notes, however, that the protection provided to whistleblowers in the Act is insufficient and the legislation has significant weaknesses. The NDP recommended that the Act be reviewed and regulations developed to strengthen support for whistleblowers. To this effect, South African Law Reform Commission published a report in 2007 that initiated the process of developing the bill that is being tabled before Parliament today. When the Act of 2000 was passed, Parliament had requested that certain aspects be further investigated. The bill seeks to strengthen the protection of whistleblowers by extending the ambit of the Act beyond the traditional employer-employee relationship, granting a person who makes a protected disclosure immunity from criminal and civil liability in certain circumstances, and creating an offense in the case of false disclosure, which is what is contentious this afternoon. Just the area of false disclosure and how we decided we will deal with it. The committee believes that a key challenge in preventing and fighting corruption is to expose corrupt activities such as bribery, fraud, theft of public funds, and other acts of wrongdoing, which is what the ANC continues to emphasize on a daily basis as we are running this country. The risk of corruption is significantly heightened in the environment where the reporting of wrongdoing is not supported or protected. And that's why we are supporting that we should actually have legislation that protects whistleblowers as the ANC. As such, the committee welcomes the introduction of the bill and believes that it will help to fight crime. The bill was advertised for public comment in various newspapers, and in all, the committee received 8 submissions. Public hearings were held on the 14th of September 2016. There was a concern that making it an offense to intentionally disclose false information may discourage disclosure by whistleblowers. However, the impact of false disclosure can be very serious for the affected party. For this reason, the committee agrees that there should be consequences for a person who intentionally disclose false information with the intention to cause harm. The committee is of the view that in this instance, such a person is not a whistleblower and therefore does not deserve the protection. We are therefore saying that we need to continue to fight corruption, we need to protect the whistleblowers, but at the same time we get worried about information that is incorrect, that is peddled about people and destroys their lives and their families' lives. So we do not want to have legislation that will have what you call gray areas when we've got to deal with issues of this nature, when people just create stories. Honorable Matthias, you came over and you are making mention of something secret, the wool being put on the faces of South Africans. You know, it's almost similar to what we're talking about, false disclosure. When you talk about something that doesn't exist and the whole public is listening to you, all this that you are saying is not what you find in this bill. The bill is just meant to protect whistleblowers as a way of ensuring that we will, as South Africa, be in the position to successfully fight corruption. Honorable Horn, you are actually saying this legislation will deter people from reporting corruption. The legislation is going to promote that. That's exactly the intention of the legislation, and you are actually saying this is what the ANC wants. I don't know why do you purposely misunderstand our intention when we're actually saying that when it comes to false disclosure, we cannot be in the position to protect such employees, which actually means that anything that is not genuine in the form of reporting is nothing that can actually be protected by this piece of legislation that we are putting before Parliament today. I thank you.
The Honorable, the Deputy Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, responsible for justice and constitutional development.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the Honourable Philani Majake had said, there's been a lot of confused speeches on the bill. So let me just again reiterate what the bill is about. It's about protecting whistleblowers in the workplace, protecting them from having action taken against them in the workplace. It's not, unfortunately, about protecting them outside of the workplace, and other remedies need to be looked at for whistleblowers who face threats, such as things like witness protection. What the bill does is extend the existing act in terms of the definition of an employee, that it's not just the formal employer-employee, it goes wider to independent contractors, temporary workers, etc. It also provides some new innovations, such as the employer has a duty to report back to the employee on their disclosure. I'm a little bit baffled at Mr. Matias's, or Honourable Matias's, raising the Protection of State Information Bill, because this bill specifically excludes, protects the whistleblower from civil and criminal liability. They shall not be liable to any civil, criminal, or disciplinary proceedings by reason of having made the disclosure if such disclosure is prohibited by any other law, oath, contract, practice, or agreement requiring him or her to maintain confidentiality or otherwise. So even if the State Information Bill was an act, if it was a genuine protected disclosure, that person would be protected, even if they had violated the Protected Disclosures Act, as long as it was a protected disclosure in terms of this, in terms of this act. So that's a major step forward. The main issue seems to be the question of the imposing a criminal penalty for false disclosure that causes harm. And Mr. Swart, I mean, you say it's international best practice. I think there has been reference to some other countries, just to give you a list of others. I mean, it's Australia, Kenya, Namibia, India, Uganda, amongst others, that do provide for some form of criminal sanction for false disclosures. So I would argue maybe that is international best practice. Why should there be the criminalization? Because if a false disclosure is made, then the institution to which the disclosure is made undertakes an investigation, often has to spend money getting an outside auditor or embarking on a forensic investigation at huge cost, only to find no impropriety. And then imagine the person against whom such a false disclosure is made, the damage to the person's reputation, his or her good name being tarnished, being subject to disciplinary action, possibly being suspended, being denied appointment to any employment, professional office or otherwise adversely affected in respect of his or her employment, profession or office, including employment opportunities and work security. But to the Honourable Horn and to the Honourable Mulder, I don't know if you've read the latest version of the bill approved by the committee, because the Honourable Horn stands here and says, if a false disclosure is made, such whistleblower will be guilty of a crime. He says, and I quote, "We'll be the first country that criminalizes a whistleblower for mistakenly but honestly believing that the information was true." That is not what is in the bill. The committee accepted an amendment from COSATU, a proposed amendment from COSATU, so the requirements for this criminalization to come into effect is, yes, number one, as was there before, knowing the information to be false or ought reasonably to have known the information is false. So honesty is not there. But this is the key point that you've missed, Honourable Horn. And that is the second requirement which you also have, is you must make the disclosure with the intention to cause harm to the affected party, and where the affected party has suffered harm. So there's two new requirements that have been put in. So a simple, honest, bona fide disclosure of false information is not criminalized. You've got to actually intend to cause harm, and you've got to actually then cause harm. So in other words, it is narrowly restricted to malicious disclosure, because we do get people in the workplace who have an axe to grind, they're about to get dismissed, and they then pretend to be a whistleblower by disclosing false information. But the Honourable Horn, so your information is quite frankly not correct, because it is not correct that simply for mistakenly but honestly disclosing information, you conveniently omitted to make any mention of this requirement of an intention to cause harm being necessary, and actually then causing harm to the enterprise or to the business. Lastly, the prosecution or the decision to prosecute is limited, has to be taken by the Director of Public Prosecutions, so who can delegate, but it's still their responsibility. So it's not something that your ordinary prosecutor in the magistrate's court can decide to institute a prosecution. So with respect, I think, unfortunately, as with so much else going on, that there's been a lot of politicking in the House. This is a good bill. The only provision that is contentious, and sorry, one other factor I mentioned, we have, as some other members had mentioned, expanded the list to whom protected disclosures can be made. We will be intending, as is provided for in the bill, to expand that further by listing bodies and what type of protected disclosures can be made to them. That was in the original Act, but we are undertaking to provide an additional list of bodies. But it is a good bill. I think that there's been a lot of noise around the criminalization and a lot of distortion around what that criminalization actually implies, and it is definitely not what the Honourable Horn says it is, and I would urge him to read the final version of the bill as approved by the committee. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
That concludes the debate. Are there any objections to the Protected Disclosures Amendment Bill being read a second time? Yes. There is an objection. I now put the question. Those in favor will say aye. And those against say no. I think the ayes have it.
Speaker, the DA calls for a division. Thank you.
A division having been called for, the bells will be rung for 3 minutes. I see a hand at that door. Can the door be locked? Can the doors be locked? Honorable members, remember you can only vote from your allocated seat. The table must make sure that when it's about time to vote, the doors are locked. All doors must be locked. Honorable members, when requested to do so, please simply indicate your vote by pressing the appropriate button, the yes, no, or abstain button accordingly. If you press the wrong button, just press the correct one afterwards, and the last pressed button will be reflected. The question before the House is that the Protected Disclosures Amendment Bill be read a second time. Are we all in our allocated seats? Voting will now commence. Those in favor of the bill being read a second time should press the yes button. Those against should press the no button. Those wishing to abstain should press the abstain button. The voting session is now over. The results are as follows. Yes, 222. No, 92. Abstain, 0. And therefore, the bill has been agreed to. The Secretary will read the bill a second time.
Protected Disclosures Amendment Bill.
The bill will be sent to the National Council of Provinces for concurrence. The Secretary will read the 4th to 6th orders together.
Consideration of report of Portfolio Committee on Police on oversight visit to police stations in and around Port Elizabeth. Consideration of report of Portfolio Committee on Police on oversight visit to Manenberg Police Station. Consideration of report of Portfolio Committee on Police on research seminar on risk factors for police.
I now recognize the Honorable the Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I move that all 3 reports be adopted by this House.
The motion is that the reports be adopted. Are there any objections? No objections. Agreed to.
Speaker.
Yes, Honorable Waters.
The DA would like to make a declaration, please. Thank you.
The DA would like to make a declaration. Go ahead,
Speaker.
honorable members.
The EFF would like to make a declaration.
All right, please come forward. Proceed, honorable member.
Ngiyabonga Somlomo. The Police Portfolio Committee's oversight visits to Manenberg Police Station, to police stations in and around Port Elizabeth, and the research seminar on risk factors for police were very useful exercises in terms of the committee's oversight mandate, as well as broadening and deepening the knowledge and understanding of the committee members of the various issues. And I must say that I always appreciate the substantive and rigorous manner in which the committee conducts its business under our very able chairperson. Now, the committee found numerous problems in a number of environments, such as the Humewood Sachs Garage, New Brighton and Kwazakele police stations, as well as in relation to human resource management. But whatever the details of the findings, there is no doubt that the root cause of these problems is leadership and management deficiencies as a result of the appointment of people who are not fit for purpose in their positions as a result of cadre deployments or otherwise. We witnessed a stark example of such unfitness for purpose in the disgraceful behavior of the Speaker this morning, which forced a walkout by the DA. That is what happens when people are put into positions they are incompetent for. They can't do the basics right, and processes can't flow the way they
Honorable
should.
Member, can you take your seat? What's the point of order?
I'm rising on Rule 85.1, where the Speaker has just impugned, cast personal reflection upon the member's integrity. Who's the Speaker? By saying that he behaved disgracefully by making, and is incompetent.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I'll reflect on that matter and rule
Madam House
thereafter.
Chair.
Order, Honorable Member. Let me just finish with Honorable Hadebe. I will recognize you. Honorable Hadebe, I've noted your matter. I'll reflect on it and then come back to the House. Yes, Honorable Steenhuisen.
Yeah, Madam House Chairperson, with respect, what we're seeing now is bordering on harassment and severely curtailing the important freedom of speech that's enshrined in both the rules of the House and bestowed upon members of this House in terms of the Constitution, in the terms of privilege. Now, what you can't do is stifle political debate by rising up and down like a jack in the box every time on Rule 85.
Honorable
It demeans the rules and it detracts from the principle behind it.
Thank you very much.
I would ask that you bear that in mind when you make this ruling.
Honorable Steenhuisen, order, honorable members. I said I will reflect on the issue raised by honorable members, a point of order, and indeed come back to this House with my ruling. Order, honorable member. What is the point of order?
I rise on Rule 84. Can you request the Chief Whip of the Opposition to withdraw the check of box? Because there is no one that is such in this House.
Order, honorable members. Can we allow the Speaker on the podium to proceed? Proceed, honorable member.
Ngiyabonga Sihlalo. I-jack in the box, toys oqala. Anyway,
honorable member, can you please focus on your speech?
Yebo Sihlalo, ngiyabonga. Now, the same has been happening in the police service, and that is why they are struggling to reduce crime, especially organized crime as reflected in the stats of the past couple of years. It also does not help that the minister in the police portfolio is unfit for office, having fallen foul of the law several times over the past 2 years. When those basics are not in place, of course you will find the problems we have with policing
Order,
and
honorable
crime.
member, your time is up. Honorable member of the EFF.
Thank you, Chair. The Economic Freedom Fighters rejects all three reports on the Police Portfolio Committee on Police, on their oversight visits in police stations in Port Elizabeth and in Manenberg, and on the research seminar on risk factors facing police. We do this because the oversight visits to police stations in Port Elizabeth prove our long-held view that the SAPS, under the leadership of Minister Nhleko, has no strategic vision on how to build up police capacity to respond to the ever-increasing levels of crime in this country. Police vehicles remain locked up in garages because there is no capacity to fix broken vehicles, leaving police stations in predominantly black communities without vehicles. There are no stables for mounted units, preventing police from accessing mountainous areas in the Eastern Cape. The electronic docket system has not been implemented in many police stations, leaving police with the perennial problem of docket theft, which leads to the release of potentially dangerous criminals back into society. This is not the problem caused by our hardworking men and women in uniform. It is a problem of leadership. Nkosinathi Nhleko is busy chasing perceived opponents in the form of McBride and others, or busy making video games defending JZ783 from censure. The seminar on risk factors affecting police also demonstrated the point we have always
Order,
made.
Honourable Member, can you take your seat?
I rise on
Order,
Rule 82,
Honourable Member.
Honourable Chair. Can the Speaker on the podium refer to honourable members of this House as honourable members and not call them by name? Thank you.
Honourable Member, did you call any honourable member by name?
No, I haven't called any honorable member by name.
Order. Honourable Member, you know that in terms of our rules, you can call... Order, Honourable Member. You can call a member honourable or Mr. Can we please stick to the rules? Proceed, Honourable Member.
Thank you, Chair. The seminar on risk factors affecting police also demonstrated the point we have always made, that policemen and women are not adequately protected from the dangers they face when doing their work. They are not properly remunerated from the kind of work they do. The danger allowance is not nearly sufficient for the levels of danger that police in Nyanga, in Kaili, Chamlazi, and other dangerous places face every day. Our rejection of these reports, therefore, is simply because we have known about these issues for a very long time, and yet Nhleko has not done anything to resolve our policing problems
Honourable
in this
Member.
country. Thank you very much.
Honourable Member, before you leave the podium, can you refer to either Mr. Nhleko or Honourable Nhleko?
Mr. Nhleko.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Honourable Member from the NFP.
Thank you, Honourable
before the
House.
member.
Chair, I was just observing.
Honourable Member, what is the point of order?
Point of order. I was just observing.
What is the point
Honourable
of order?
Mandla and Chairman Katz.
Honourable
They are
Member.
fighting on this thing.
Honourable Member.
That's what they are here for.
Order.
I watch my
Honourable
hand, Chair.
Member,
Sorry, Chair.
can we please raise the point of order as is appropriate? Honourable Member, can you please proceed?
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. Honourable House Chair, the Manenberg Police Station
Order, Chair.
serves more than 91...
Order. Honourable Member, what's the point you are rising on?
Chair, I rise on Rule 31, which allows me to push a motion without notice. Chair, I'm from the Eastern Cape. The ANC must not undermine Mandla. He's a chief.
Order.
He can't be used as a popcorn like
Order.
that.
Honourable
That man
Member.
can't stay there and
Honourable
be
Member,
raising
can you
orders.
take your seat?
Thank you.
Honourable members, can we please use our rules appropriately? If there are issues of debate, we've got opportunity to actually debate those. I think we should really respect the rules that we set. Honourable Member, can you please proceed?
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. The Manenberg Police Station serves more than 91,000 people where unemployment is at 40%. And armed gang warfare is the order of the day. High prevalence of drug abuse. The police station has difficulty to maintain peace and order in the 10 square kilometre precinct with 46 vehicles and being understaffed. We also agree with the recommendation of the Portfolio Committee that a specialist unit be established which will focus on illegal firearms and narcotics. The National Freedom Party believes that a severe clampdown by this specialized unit will go a long way to address the gang violence which holds such deadly consequences for the community. A matter of great concern is the Tetra 1011 communication system, which has already spent about R500 million, which was with a 1 billion budget.
1 billion due to delays caused by the Public Works Department in not having handed over the sites to the South African Police Services. The police station visited at KwaZulu and New Brighton police station and cell, it was quite clear that they had serious challenges in terms of infrastructure, where you found 4 detectives were actually using one little office to interview both complainants as well as witnesses, and that is, I think, quite a challenge. But what we found is the high level of unemployment, poverty, and the not having proper regulatory framework for spaza shops and things were some of the reasons that they face a serious challenge. The NFP welcomed the report of the Portfolio Committee report on the seminar held to analyze and investigate the serious causes of crime in the respective areas. Honorable Chairperson, I just want to add that one of the highlights was the visit to the Mount Road, which I think I previously said to this House, on the success in terms of police officers from different stations and how they track criminals. And I think they're doing a fantastic job, and I think we must commend them for that. It is encouraging also to know the wide range of role players and interested parties who have participated in the way the risks were analyzed and discussed from different perspectives. We believe that such a multidisciplinary approach will assist us to gain a holistic view of the problems and risks faced by our SAPS members.
Your time has expired. Honourable members, those who are still going to speak on the podium, just to indicate to you that the watch has frozen, unfortunately, was trying to correct it, so we'd use the manual watch to be able to guide you on your time. Honourable member of the IFP.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. The community of Manenberg is beset with crime and violence brought about through gangsterism, turf wars and drugs. Violent death is commonplace, and every so often it is an innocent bystander who is caught in the crossfire of this lawlessness. SAPS Manenberg is at the coalface of keeping law and order, protecting the community and arresting and removing criminal elements from the streets. The questions we had to ask were, is the SAPS equal to the task? Are they capable? Are they logistically capacitated? Is there an active community policing forum? With 17 gang-related deaths since April of this year, 20 case dockets opened with 15 being attempted murder dockets, there is clear evidence of the current war zone in the area. 24 vacant posts at station level will not assist SAPS Manenberg or its community. So these must be filled immediately. Greater community cooperation and preventive strategies in collaboration with basic education and community in keeping kids out of gangs must be intensified. Furthermore, closer collaboration with the CPF and Departments of Human Settlements and Social Development is necessary. Large-scale unemployment in the area must be addressed. As until we address underlying societal causes of gangsterism, must be addressed, otherwise we are simply fighting a losing battle. I thank you. The IFP supports the committee report.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Honourable Member of the ANC.
Honourable Chairperson, Honourable Members, fellow South Africans, I rise on behalf of the ANC to support the 3 reports. The oversight visits was conducted in line with the Constitution that provides for oversight over the executive and also with a stated goal in the National Development Plan to promote the professionalisation of the South African Police Service. The seminar on risk factors for police was aimed at sharpening the public debate about the safety, health and welfare of police officers in executing their duties and mandate. The Portfolio Committee in the past expressed its serious concern about the number of police officers who were injured and killed in the course of the executing of their duties. The committee made 8 recommendations in the report, amongst others, that the Civilian Secretariat develop improved policy proposals to ensure greater safety for police officers, and the South African Police Service to develop an improved profiling system in order to identify at-risk officers and act proactively to neutralize dangerous situations. All South Africans must support efforts to stop the killing of our policemen and women. The oversight visit in the Eastern Cape focused on the capability of the SAP specialized units, police station in the Nelson Mandela area, TETRA, and the Private Security Industry Regulatory Authority, and the establishment of the Nelson Mandela Metro Police. The recommendations with regard to SAPs highlight the need for improved management of the vehicle fleet, approved procurement policies for vehicles and equipment that will contribute to fighting crime more effectively, maintenance and facility management in cooperation with public works, and the increase of registered informers at station level, as well as the rotation of key staff at station and cluster level. The TETRA communication system is critical for the safety and security of the residents of the Eastern Cape. The committee recommended that the TETRA contract must be finalized and the system be implemented without undue delays through the finalization of the necessary contracts required for its operation. I thank you.
The motion is that the reports be adopted. Are there any objections? If there are any objections, I now put the questions. Those in favor will say aye, and those against will say no. The ayes have it. If parties want their objections recorded, they must indicate.
We call for division, Chairperson.
A division having been called, the bells will be rung for 3 minutes. Are all doors locked? I would like to remind members that they may only vote from their allocated seats. When requested to do so, members must simply indicate their vote by pressing the appropriate button below the yes, no, or abstain signs. If a member inadvertently presses the wrong button, the member may thereafter press the right button. The last button pressed will be recorded as the member's vote when the voting session is closed by the chair. Order. The question before the House is that the report must be adopted. Are all members in their allocated seats? Voting will now commence. Those in favor of the reports being adopted should press the yes button. Those against should press the no button. Those wishing to abstain should press the abstain button. Have all members voted? Thank you. The voting session is now closed. The results of the division is as follows. The yes, 275, no, 19, and there are no abstentions, and therefore the reports have been adopted. We now go to the seventh order. The Secretary will read the seventh order.
Consideration of report of Portfolio Committee on Tourism on 2016 Tourism Indaba.
I now recognize the Honorable Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
House Chair, I move that the report be adopted by this House.
The motion is that the reports be adopted. I've observed that there are requests for declarations. I now recognize the DA.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Speaking on this item today provides an opportunity for the DA to express its views on the importance of the tourism in Indaba in order to create market access and business growth for African tourism products and services. I say this because following a review on the Indaba conducted in 2014, it was concluded that to elevate the trade show exhibition, pairing with a strategic partner was recommended. Then, after an extensive process whereby industry was invited to submit proposals, it was suddenly decided to go it alone. Much to our surprise, SA Tourism concluded that the strategic partnership model is not the best option to follow. This while there was already a drop in the number of exhibitors and people exhibiting at the trade show earlier this year. This is somewhat disappointing because a lot of money and resources were spent on this process with the aim of taking the Indaba to the next level. We believe that the objective should not only be to ensure that Indaba remains beneficial as possible for the industry, but also that it continues to be the best business networking meeting for exhibitors and for buyers who want to do business with our destination. Furthermore, Madam Chair, it is our submission that there should be as much industry participation as possible so that we can showcase the diversity and variety of the many proudly South African tourism products on offer. Because, Madam Chair, if we get this right, it would allow for the many more entrepreneurs and emerging small businesses to gain market access and trade opportunities, especially now that unemployment figures stand at 27%. So therefore, we need tourism to work to ensure that the South African economy remains a growing economy. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The EFF.
The Economic Freedom Fighters rejects the Portfolio Committee Tourism Report in the Tourism Indaba. The first Tourism Indaba was held in 1977. At that time, its sole purpose was to boost the business needs of wholly-wide tourism sector. Today, almost 40 years later, the tourism industry is still lily-white, with black sprinkled just to fool us into believing that we are transformed. It is said that South Africa has about 10,000 accommodation establishments, of which only 50% are graded. What we are not told is who owns these establishments, who benefits from the tourism the most. Were this to be told, it will be clear for everyone that the industry has not transformed at all, and the department has no plan, no vision to bring in more black people in the industry. The ill-fated attempts at ownership at township tourism seek to normalize the township as places of residence for black people. But the township remains as flea-ridden, rat-infested labor concentration camps where people should not be staying. Until this country comes up with the visionary strategies to benefit a large group of our people, we cannot support it as the EFF. All these things point to a problem of a chronic underfunding of the tourism industry in this country. We need the department to champion efforts to have more funding directed towards this industry for the potential it has to bring economic opportunities to the marginalized black people. The Indaba may be different from what it was before. The Indaba may be different from what it was, but the structure of ownership has not changed. This will not change until we aggressively change the property ownership patterns. Black people must not be reduced to just labor in the industry. They must own guest houses. They must own the land, housing. Until such time, we will continue to reject the Indaba. That is only meant to strengthen white bosses. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. The IFP agrees that there must be meaningful participation of disadvantaged people in the tourism sector through equity and ownership rather than just being employees at tourist destinations. But what we are discussing here today is the tourism in Indaba and its success or not. And it was its 37th year and it was billed as a great success and is now the premier tourism trade and consumer show on the African continent. Given the current global economic slowdown, it is imperative that we have an event of this type in order to showcase brand South Africa, its attractiveness and appeal from a global tourist point of view, and the many reasons why we are premier tourist destination. At the Indaba, to quote from what you said, Honourable Minister of Tourism, you said the world's tourists want what we have. They want leisure, wildlife and adventure, and they continue to come to Africa for this, close quote. I think this statement confirms that our wildlife forms a principal part of this international appeal, and yet we find ourselves continuing to allow certain hunting practices such as captive bred lion hunting to be perpetuated in this country. This benefits a few previously advantaged hunting farms at the expense of the rest of the country and at the expense of our tourism, as we see many calls to boycott South Africa by some of these organizations as a tourist destination because of such practices. And we believe it is important, Honourable Minister, that you come together with your other colleagues in the executive to deal with this matter here so we don't have this unscrupulous money grabbers using this kind of practice to make more money and more profit. Our domestic tourism market must be encouraged, and South Africans should first and foremost be tourists in their own country and be encouraged to explore our many wonderful landscapes. Development of our domestic tourism is a major gateway to growth in the industry. We support this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Member from UDM.
Indaba or no Indaba. The biggest institution to block the advancement of the black people in tourism in South Africa are the MPs, government. Recently, the NCOP was in East London. As far as I've been informed, there is not a single MP was allocated to a single black-owned establishment, not one. And we're talking about hundreds of people. Those are tourists that should have benefited the East London B&B owners, most of whom are black. So we in this House, the people who decide on where MPs should reside, are the killers of black business. Let's have that on record and not come and pretend here like we are supporting those that we say we are supporting, because the reality is totally different on the ground. As the Portfolio Committee of Rural Development, we've just toured the provinces, all of them. Not one day, we're not such a big party, not one day were we allocated to a business that we know is owned by blacks. So as much as we pretend like we are all to help them, the opposite is directly true. if our thinking does not change, Honorable Minister, we continue to directly suppress them such that they don't rise anywhere in the economy of this country. It rests with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As you started your speech, I thought you were going to say, this is a question at the end of your phrase. Honorable Member of the ANC.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson and members of the House. From the onset, the ANC support the report on South African tourism. Indaba was successfully held for the 37th time in Durban in 2016. For the first time this year, Indaba brought a total of 70 emerging tourism enterprises to exhibit their businesses. Of the 20 focused on the adventure experiences offered by the country. A total of 14 included those who had won the Lilizela Tourism Award. In interacting with these SMMEs, they were satisfied and thankful that government has offered them the opportunity to expose their business to international buyers. Honorable Chair, tourism has contributed 375 billion to the GDP and employed 1 million people in 2015. The involvement of the SMMEs ensures transformation and benefits to all participating citizens. The ministerial media talk facilitated by Mr. Richard Quest of CNN was also the first of its kind, where frank discussions were held relating to open skies policy and implementation thereof. Interdepartmental collaboration during policy formulation and trust between government and the industry. The ministerial roundtable session is also gaining momentum, having been hosted for the second time. This has made Indaba a true Pan-African tourism trade and consumer show, with ministers of tourism from Burkina Faso, Ghana, Lesotho, Namibia, Swaziland, Uganda, Zambia, and also Zimbabwe. We support this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections? I now put the question. Those in favor will say aye. And those against will say no. I think the ayes have it.
Chair, the EFF calls for division. Thank you.
A division having been called, the bells will be rung for 2 minutes. Are the doors locked? Order, honorable members. I'd like to remind members that they may only vote from their allocated seats. When requested to do so, members must simply indicate their vote by pressing the appropriate button below the yes, no, or abstain signs. If a member inadvertently presses the wrong button, the member may thereafter press the correct button. The last button pressed will be recorded as the member's vote when the voting session is closed. The question before the House is that the report of the Portfolio Committee on Tourism on the Tourism Indaba 2015 be adopted. Are all members in their allocated seats? Voting will now commence. Those in order. Order, honorable members. Are the machines working now? Voting will now commence. Those in favor of the report should press the yes button. Those against should press the no. Those wishing to abstain should press the abstain button. Have all members voted? Thank you. The voting session is now closed. Can you please close the door until we announce the results? Order, honorable members. The results of the division are as follows: yes, 261, no, 19, abstained, 0. Therefore, the report has been adopted. Order, honorable members. The motion on the order paper, which is the item that is following, is in the name of Honorable N.F. Shibambo. Honorable Shibambo will move the motion.
Thank you very much, House Chair. We stand here to...
Order, Honorable Shibambo. Can you just take a seat? I wanted them to sort out the clock. Can you please start the clock correctly? Table staff, can you please start the clock correctly? Honorable Shibambo has 5 minutes. Order. Honorable Shibambo, you can move the motion.
Thank you very much, House Chair. We stand here to talk about the incomplete transition, the negotiated and extremely violent transition from apartheid to what we currently have. That there's still a lot of legislations that exist that come from the colonial apartheid past. That in the process of transition, there was an agreement in the negotiation process that all the laws that existed under the colonial apartheid regime are going to be enforced unless if they are repealed. In the first democratic parliament, there was the process of the rationalization laws that were passed in terms of trying to bring into commonality some of the legislations that existed in various territories, that were so-called self-governing under apartheid. And it repealed certain legislations and brought into some sense the kind of laws that have to govern our society. But there is still a lot of legislation that defines the apartheid and racist past, the nonsensical apartheid past, even on petty issues that speak to how public holidays must be handled. For instance, there is a law that is called the prohibition of the exhibition of films on Sundays and public holidays. A law that was passed under apartheid in 1977 that says that you cannot watch movies on Sundays and public holidays is still in effect. We have got lots of petty laws. The Trespassing Act is still in existence. There are lots of things. There is a law that speaks about the prohibition of disguise acts. But the most important one is the Righteous Assemblies Act, which our colleague is going to speak to later. A law that states in its objects that it aims to protect the Europeans against non-Europeans. And that is a law that is being utilized by the National Prosecutions Authority now to prosecute the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Economic Freedom Fighters. Is still in existence. Why are we there is because the current government, the ANC, has neglected the important task of legislative reform and repeal of all legislations that existed prior 1994. It has now become the real committee that manages the common affairs of the bourgeoisie, both petty and genuine bourgeoisie. They fight amongst themselves in terms of how they must administer interest of the bourgeoisie and not care about the foundations of South Africa's constitutional democracy. So we stand here to give a concrete proposal that we should constitute an ad hoc committee here in Parliament, identify all the laws that were passed under the colonial apartheid regime, and then refer them to a proper process, of course working with the relevant organs of the state, including the executive and judiciary, but the Parliament must be the primary organ that is responsible for the repeal of all this legislation. Let's identify that process through an ad hoc committee, engage, call for public submissions on people who are dealing with issues that are affecting them in terms of laws that happened in the past. And then we come back to Parliament and repeal all those legislations. We appreciate that you are failing in virtually everything else that you are doing, particularly in terms of economic management and transformation. But you cannot fail on a simple task of repealing all the legislations that came from the past, so that we give a constitutional court the space to deal with how do we interpret the laws that have been adopted by this particular parliament and not be the one that repeals legislation. Just last week, the constitutional court was repealing some municipal legislations that throughout has been in existence around issues of how who is responsible for which task between the province and the municipality. So we are standing up as the EFF to propose that we should have an ad hoc committee that must be constituted in terms of the rules of the National Assembly that is going to start the process of repealing all the apartheid and colonial legislations that still refer to an existence of a queen that speaks about Europeans and non-Europeans in South Africa, and now it is 2016. We have to take this decision, it's rational. We know there's mediocrity in terms of how you interpret this, but let's work on it together. Thank you very much.
Honorable the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services.
Tatan Shwam, I invite you for a cup of tea after this. Samlana is changani kota kubonsa. But Chairperson, honorable members, ministers, deputy ministers, guests of this august house, the matter before us this afternoon is bound to invoke much emotion in most of us, understandably so given the recent past of apartheid oppression we endured as a nation prior to liberation and the ushering in of the constitutional democracy in our country 2 decades ago. Indeed, a preamble that still exists on our statute books of the kind that is at issue in this debate, and that reads as follows, and I quote, "This act was enacted to consolidate the laws relating to riotous assemblies and the prohibition of engendering of feelings of hostility between European and non-European inhabitants of the Republic," close quote, only serves to remind us of the history of the struggle to which many of our heroes and heroines, past and present, even in this House as we speak, selflessly contributed towards. Our Constitution in its preamble has the following to say, and I quote, "We, the people of South Africa, recognize the injustices of our past, honor those who suffered for justice and freedom in our land, respect those who have worked to build and develop our country, believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. We therefore, through our freely elected representatives, adopt this Constitution as the supreme law of the Republic, so as to heal the divisions of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights," close quote. This having been said, however, it is the same Constitution that further states in Schedule 6, Section 1, Sub 1, that, and I quote, "All law that was still in force when the new Constitution took effect continues in force unless amended or repealed, and if it is consistent with the new Constitution." This rule equally applies to the Act which is the subject of this debate today. As the ANC government, we undertook, as clearly stipulated in the National Development Plan, to ensure that our people are and feel safe. This is a commitment that is being realized throughout the country as various government departments roll out a number of programs to ensure a better life for our people. As the Justice, Crime Prevention and Security Cluster, we have a responsibility to enforce and implement laws that are meant to protect our citizens. Imagine a country where peace and stability is compromised by public violence, instigated by many through what they say and encourage in various fora, and law enforcement is left powerless because the only effective tool available to the state to meaningfully counter such undesirable action is an old law passed under apartheid. This, even if it has since been amended by a democratic parliament, at least insofar as its provisions that are relevant in this instance, despite it commencing with a preamble that is no longer appropriate under a constitutional democracy. This is more so in light of the fact that the EFF bases its constitutional challenge on the preamble of the law in question, without necessarily confronting the specific sections that are used to charge many whose actions cause irreparable harm due to their committing crimes that have serious bearing on peace and stability in our country. We are law-abiding citizens and a government that has the best interests of its own people at heart, and therefore allowing such would be failure to ensure safety of all our people as our Constitution mandates us. Honorable members, I will exercise restraint in my submissions here this afternoon in view of the matter being subject to judicial determination before the North Gauteng High Court. Let me in the same breath state that it is therefore mischievous of the Economic Freedom Front to bring this matter up for debate in this august legislature when they have simultaneously sought to have it
Order, Chair.
adjudicated upon by the courts.
Order,
It is
Honorable
merely-
Minister. Can you take your seat? Honorable
I'm
Member,
just
what's the
worried,
point?
are we debating a motion by EFF?
What is
or-
the point of order?
No, the minister just said this motion is brought by the Freedom Front. And which motion are we
Order.
debating?
I'm sure the minister will correct that.
No, Chair, don't protect him. It's your
I will-
duty.
Order.
It's your duty to correct him because
Order.
he is distorting us.
Honorable
We
Member.
are EFF.
Honorable Member, can you take a seat? Honorable Minister, it is alleged that you mentioned Freedom Front as opposed to Economic Freedom Fighters. If you have done so, you can please correct it. Thank you.
Certainly, Chairperson, although I must say that the difference seems to be minimal because they are both on the extreme side of the equilibrium. But yes, I correct that. Let me, on the same breath, state that it is therefore mischievous of the economic freedom fighters to bring this matter up for debate in this august legislature when they have simultaneously sought to have it adjudicated upon by the courts. It is merely a ploy to get this House, to be seized with a matter that is otherwise best resolved as it is currently by the courts, or as it's sought to be by the courts. This is yet another example of the EFF tendency of seeking to condemn others for failing to uphold the Constitution, the rule of law, and respect for the independence of the judiciary, which are key pillars of our constitutional democracy, and yet render themselves guilty of saying, provoked or unprovoked, thus offending on the proverbial English adage, those who live in glass houses don't throw stones. Honorable members, allow me to reflect on the legislation in its current form. The Riotous Assemblies Act of 1957 remains on our statute books, 1956 remain on our statute books, but with 3 sections only, namely section 16, 17, and 18, which are still in force. These 3 remaining sections are intended to deal with A, public safety and the handling of explosives, B, acts or conduct which constitutes incitement to violence, and C, attempt, conspiracy, and inducing any other person to commit an offense. We hold the firm view that regardless of the era in which the act was passed that contains these provisions, they remain necessary, as putting them aside without anything in their place in the immediate would result in the state being unable to effectively respond to anarchic behavior sought to be propagated by the EFF through a number of its campaigns aimed at promoting lawlessness and anarchy in the country. Therefore, the focus on the preamble without addressing ourselves to these relevant sections is to adopt a narrow approach to a matter that requires a holistic interrogation and introspection and a reflection on the issues at hand. The General Law Amendment Act 49 of 1996 into the Riotous Assemblies Act of 1956, in particular section 17 and 18, addresses the acts or conduct which constitutes an incitement to public violence, hence the view that same remains relevant and are of necessity. In other words, what I'm trying to explain is that these provisions which are at issue were in fact introduced in the 1956 Act by this Parliament in 1996 during democracy. So we are not talking, strictly speaking, about an apartheid law, but a law passed under democracy. The amendment reads as follows, and I quote, "A person shall be deemed to have committed the common law offense of incitement to public violence if in any place whatever he has acted or conducted himself in such a manner or has spoken or published such words that it might reasonably be expected that the natural and probable consequences of his conduct, speech, or publication would, under the circumstances, be the commission of public violence by members of the public generally or by persons in whose presence the act or conduct took place or to whom the speech or publication was addressed, end quote. The amendment of the criminal law on Section 18 addresses the issue of attempt, conspiracy, and inducing another person to commit offense, and it reads as follows, and I quote, sub 1, any person who attempts to commit any offense against a statute or a statutory regulation shall be guilty of an offense, and if no punishment is expressly provided thereby for such an attempt, be liable on conviction to the punishment to which a person convicted of actually committing that offense would be liable. Sub 2 states, any person who A, conspires with any other person to aid or procure the commission or of or to commit, or B, incites, instigates, commands, or procures any other person to commit any offense, whether at common law or against a statute or statutory regulation, shall be guilty of an offense and liable on conviction to the punishment to which a person convicted of actually committing that offense would be liable. Madam Chair, the cornerstone of any criminal regime is the criminalization of inchoate crimes such as incitement and conspiracy with a view to preventing irreparable harm which follows if a crime is carried out. In the case of South Africa, the legislature, in terms of the General Law Amendment Act 49 of 1996, I alluded to earlier, criminalizes conspiracy and incitement in terms of the Riotous Assemblies Act, making such activities a criminal offense when linked to common law and statutory crimes. The Act is therefore simply a mechanism to codify a fundamental principle of our criminal law. Inchoate crimes have the status of customary international law, and there is no provision in the Constitution to the effect that they should not be part of South African law. In State versus Basson, 2007-1, SACR 566 CC, that's a constitutional court judgment, for example, the Riotous Assemblies Act 17 of 1956 was before the Constitutional Court. This would have been an ideal opportunity to strike the legislation down as unconstitutional. On the contrary, the court extended its ambit to conspiracies to commit crimes outside the borders of South Africa when required by international obligations. The Act has also been used in the crafting of many indictments and charge sheets since the dawn of democracy and the birth of our constitutional order without any successful constitutional challenge. So give us the evidence to suggest that our courts have found these provisions to be inimical to our Constitution, then we will listen to you. Thank you very much.
Honorable Kado.
Thank you, Chair. 22 years after the inauguration of the first democratic parliament, we should have eradicated from our statute books all those apartheid-era laws that were used to crush opposition and stifle dissent. Yet, just the other day, an opposition leader was charged under the Riotous Assemblies Act of 1956. Jimmy Kruger, one of the most vicious apparatchiks of the apartheid state, used the same act to ban all public meetings in the wake of the 1976 Soweto uprising. 40 years on, the ANC is now using the tools of the former oppressor to harass and persecute its democratically elected opponents. This is a scenario so absurd, so ironic, and so farcical that, were it not true, it could be the subject of a darkly comic novel. In fact, had Tom Sharp been alive today, the author of the 1971 career-launching book Riotous Assembly might have used the summons served on the Honourable Malema in terms of the Riotous Assemblies Act as the seed of a sequel. Sharp would have found it easy to send up the ANC government. Instead of the blundering but sinister duo of Commandant van Heerden and Constable Else in the first Riotous Assembly, we would have the blundering but sinister quartet of security cluster ministers. Minister of Police, Nathi Nhleko, who covered up for President Zuma in the eNCA scandal while covering himself in a fire pool of sweat. Minister of State Security, David Nails Mahlobo, who blocked the signal in Parliament, possibly got other things unblocked at a massage parlour owned by someone linked to rhino horn trafficking, and is still deciding whether or not student leader Mthebo Dlamini has ever been to his home. Minister of Defence, Nosiviwe Mapisa Inkakula, who apparently smuggled someone into South Africa with false documents, and under whose watch the whistleblower on a 10 million rand departmental tender scandal has been victimized and pursued by intelligence operatives. And Minister of Justice, Michael Masuta, who took us out of the International Criminal Court, invited the supposedly independent National Director of Public Prosecutions, Sean Abrahams, into Luthuli House ahead of Minister Pravin Gordhan being charged, and who somehow managed to find himself in the bathroom during the no-confidence vote
On a point of order.
in President Zuma.
Order. Honourable Member, what's the point of order?
Honourable Chairperson, I'm standing on a point of order in accordance with Rule 85 to say that the Speaker is busy making string of allegations against the ministers, and he understands and knows very well that he's got to do a substantive motion and not come here and grandstand.
Thank you, Honourable Member, for raising the point of order in terms of Rule 85. Honourable Member, you have made certain statements, and I think you know that when you make such allegations, you'll bring them with a substantive motion. Thank you.
This bumbling amateurishness, coupled with menacing underhandedness.
Order. Honourable Member, what's the point of order?
I think you have to listen when the speakers are speaking there. There's no allegation the speaker is making there. I'll give you an example. He says that
Honourable Member.
Honourable Mahlobo does not know whether Mthebo was in his house or not. It's a fact. I mean, what is
Thank you, Honourable
about
Member. Can you take your seat? Can you take your seat?
Fact. Why should we have a substantial motion to state an open, objective fact?
Honourable Member, as indicated, I've made a ruling. However, if there is dissatisfaction with the rules, we all know that we will actually do that in an appropriate forum. Thank you very much. Proceed, Honourable Member.
The bumbling amateurishness of the security cluster, coupled with its menacing underhandedness, has become a hallmark of these ministers. We are witnessing the re-securitization of public life by securocrats and idiocrats. And apartheid-era legislation has become a weapon in their arsenal.
Order, Honourable Member, can you take your seat? What's the point of order you're rising on, Honourable Member?
Rule 68, irrelevance and share opportunity. I mean,
Order, Honourable Member.
The member is not addressing the
Order,
motion.
Honourable Member. The member is expressing himself in relation to the motion at hand. Proceed, Honourable Member.
They use laws that violate the constitutional values of freedom, transparency, and accountability. The National Key Points Act of 1980, for example, was used to shield the president from scrutiny over eNCA. Research by the Freedom of Expression Institute and the Wits Centre for Applied Legal Studies has shown that apartheid laws restricting access to information and media freedom continue to languish on the statute books. In 2008, the SA Law Commission announced that it was embarking on a major review of 2,800 laws enacted since 1910. The aim was to repeal laws that were discriminatory or conflicted with the Constitution. 8 years later, Parliament has still not brought this process to completion. national security laws still confer wide powers on the President and Cabinet to keep certain information secret. For example, Section 1181B of the National Defence Act of 1957 forbids the publication of any statement, comment or rumour relating to any activity of the South African Defence Force that is calculated to, quote, prejudice or embarrass the government in its foreign relations or to alarm or depress members of the public, close quote. Ministers Mashabane and Nkakula could have a field day with that. A raft of other legislative provisions from the apartheid era contravene our right of access to information, such as the Armaments Development and Production Act of 1968, the National Supplies Procurement Act of 1970, the Petroleum Products Act of 1977, and of course the Protection of Information Act of 1982, which is being replaced by the Totalitarian Secrecy Bill. Honourable Chair, it is time to relegate these laws to the scrap heap of history. It is time to reject rule by securocrats and idiocrats, which is a hangover from our dark past. In 1994, we were meant to move from a closed authoritarian autocracy to an open egalitarian democracy. But the ANC government, and especially its security cluster in cabinet, seems to want to stall that movement. This is just madness. As the central character in Tom Sharp's riotous assembly, Miss Hazelstone, says to her doctor, and I quote, madness is so monotonous. You would think that fantasies would be more interesting, but really one has to conclude that insanity is a poor substitute for reality. Close quote. I thank you.
Honourable Menton.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, as part of today's debate, we want to focus specifically on the Riotous Assemblies Act 17 of 1957, which was intended only to deal with the radical shift of the Freedom Charter, in particular with the land question. The Riotous Assemblies Act purpose was to consolidate the laws relating to the riotous assemblies and the prohibition of the endangering of feelings of hostility between the Europeans and non-European inhabitants of the Union and matters. This act was passed by Parliament in an attempt to suppress the Freedom Charter after it was adopted in June 1955. We are standing here today because the current dying ANC government is using the law of oppressors to oppress opposition in efforts to remain relevant. Mr. Sean Abrams, after he visited Luthuli House, he charged the EFF Commander-in-Chief and President with this law. In 2014, during the EFF First National People's Assembly in Mangaung, and in 2015 in Newcastle, the CIC is said to have contravened Section 18 of the Riotous Assemblies Act, in that he commanded supporters of the EFF to occupy land. This is a sign of desperation by a corrupt regime, which has run out of options and has lost all the legitimacy. The EFF is reliably informed that Mr. Jacob Zuma now consults with the apartheid murderers such as Nell Bernard to seek advice on how to suppress political opponents. The charges against the CIC Julius Malema are foolproof and complete evidence that Mr. Sean Abrams was given a political instruction to criminally prosecute and all the people who made submissions to the public protector on the matters of state capture by the Gupta family. And he chose to use a law of oppressors. We are fully aware that the charges are political decision of a captured government that out of desperation is relying on the laws of oppressors. The use of Riotous Assemblies Act of 1956 is only happening because of a captured South African government, which is now degenerating into a political intolerant dictatorship. It is for this logical reason that Parliament must urgently do its work and remove all the legislations that are inconsistent with the values of our Constitution, particularly those that still intend to protect feelings and privileges of white people against black people. Thank you very much.
Honourable Singh.
Honourable Chairperson, the IFP welcomes the opportunity to debate This motion on the repeal of apartheid legislation and any other pre-1994 legislation found to be inconsistent with the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa to the extent of its inconsistency. However, this debate should not be just about the Riotous Assembly Act 17 of 1956. Racial segregation, whilst comprehensively legislated for during the period of the national government from 1948 onwards, was also precipitated by discriminatory pieces of legislation during the periods of Dutch and English rule in South Africa. Chairperson, this issue of identifying and repealing such legislation is an issue which is currently before the National Assembly Programming Committee, after it was raised by the Honorable Shivambu in a formal meeting that was chaired by the Speaker. As a result of that process, the parliamentary law advisors informed us that they are currently compiling a list of offending legislation. Last week, Honorable Shivambu was not there. And they advised us that there are many hundreds of pieces of legislation that are being perused, and that a comparative analysis and cross-reference is being conducted on at least 2 legal databases to ensure that no offensive legislation is missed. One should not embark, we believe, on a clean sweep and repeal of all law, but rather those provisions in our law, unless, of course, the scope and object of any particular act is offending, of those provisions that are found to be inconsistent with our Constitution and democratic dispensation and therefore invalid. The IFP wholly supports this process. We believe it is necessary. A law that is not repealed stands and would have to be challenged in a court of law to defend its validity or otherwise. It's as simple as that. Offensive, apartheid, separatist legislation must be identified in repealing and be repealed. In closing, though, the IFP believes that this Parliament, through its law advisors, is equal to the task that has been given to them by the Programming Committee. And we do not believe that there is a need at this moment in time for an ad hoc committee to deal with this matter. What we would say that as a point of departure, we should allow the parliamentary law advisors sufficient time to identify and present to Parliament through the relevant portfolio committee the pieces of legislation that are in need of repeal and move the process forward from there. But not only provide us a list, but also give us a summary of the objectives of those pieces of legislation so we know whether those were obnoxious laws or not. And we believe that the time frame suggested in this motion is sufficient for that process to be completed and all obnoxious laws to be removed from our statute books. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Honorable Nwabe.
Bakithi manje mase instructor ngakhuluma nokhuluma. Honorable Chairperson, honorable
Protected
members,
Honorable Nwabe, proceed.
honorable members in the guests in the gallery. Indeed, Chair, the NFP supports the call for scrapping of apartheid laws which are not in line with our Constitution. We find it unthinkable that 22 years after the dawn of democracy in our country, we could still be using unjust laws which are remnants of a political order which dehumanized us, brutalized society, and strip our people of dignity and equality. The unjust apartheid and colonial era legislation needs to be expunged from our law books as a matter of urgency, because every day that those laws are in place is a day of shame of our collective consciousness. As Parliament, it is our duty to do a full review of apartheid era legislation and commit ourselves to scrap those laws which are unjust and those that can be abrogated through disuse. However, the call must be made solely with the intention to promote and protect the Bill of Rights and our Constitution. We have to guard against promoting and protecting lawlessness and anarchy within the country, even though our intentions in repealing legislation might be noble. Where a law is not contrary with the Constitution, we have to continue to comply with the provisions since we cannot promote lawlessness. The foundation of a democratic society rests upon laws that are just, and where a legal lacuna arises through the repeal of legislation, it is imperative that the void to be filled with the new legislation which would assure legal certainty and continuity. The NFP supports the formation of a multi-party ad hoc committee to do a review of all apartheid-era legislation with a firm mandate and a time frame to report back to Parliament on which of those laws are deemed to be in conflict with our Constitution. We would furthermore suggest that a technical legal subcommittee be established to advise on those apartheid-era laws which the ad hoc committee deemed to be offensive, and as well as those laws which are to be amended, the laws which are necessary to replace offensive legislation if needed. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Fultane.
I shall deal with the broader issues, not with the technicalities. Discrimination under Section 9.5 of the Constitution must be fair. The Writers' Assemblies Act is not. Section 17 of our Constitution states, everyone has the right, peaceful and unarmed, to assemble, to demonstrate, to picket, and to present petitions. Section 18 states, everyone has the right to freedom of association. Section 19(1)(b) states, every citizen is free to participate in the activities of a political party. Section 25(5) of the Constitution states, the state must take reasonable legislative measures to foster conditions which enable citizens to gain access to land on an equitable basis. One of the most poignant tenets of apartheid laws, following as they do on the dispossession of the indigenous peoples of South Africa, was to legislate for Europeans' biased ownership of land in South Africa, a state of affairs which sadly still persists even today. Given this background, it is now incumbent upon the state to make laws that repeal all apartheid laws that still appear in our statute books. The preamble to our Constitution states, we, the people of South Africa, recognize the injustices of our past, believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, adopt this Constitution as the supreme law of the Republic, so as to improve the quality of life of all citizens and free the potential of every person. Now, so the moment of truth has arrived for the ANC government. Is the ANC government prepared and strong enough to urgently repeal, through a law of general application as is provided for in Section 36 of our Constitution, all apartheid laws? Section 36 deals with capping or qualifying the freedoms that are granted in our Bill of Rights. Or will the ANC government continue to subtly support discrimination? The answers to that question will be known by South Africa today. If the ANC does not act decisively now and wants to wait for next year's policy conference of its own, can only mean one of two things. Either their current policies to sustain apartheid subtly though, or they are undecided on even the importance of land use, so hotly debated. The Writers' Assemblies Act of '56 makes it perfectly clear that of its intentions. Section 17 of that act is in contradiction of Section 17 of our Constitution. So as we move on, we say the current administration should have foreseen that people will, from time to time, gather and plan to take land unless government made bold steps to forestall this. The principle of dolus eventualis comes to play here. Well, as it is now, it has failed to do so. And in conclusion, we say there is a time
your
in the
time
affairs
is now
of man,
expired.
which
Thank you.
taken at the flood leads on to fortune. If you omit this opportunity, you will not rule come 2019. I thank you.
The next speaker is the Honourable Marke.
Thank you, Chairperson. I would like to say up front, I'm not going to take any questions. When people talk, as far as I can remember, the president of this country has appointed a high-level panel to review legislation. I think that panel is in place. And that panel simply says if you have got a problem with whatever legislation, you go to that panel. I think this is grandstanding. You can't bring that if you already, this government of the ANC has already noticed and it has taken steps to deal with the problem.
Chair, on a point
Then when
of
you
order.
come here and you grandstand,
Honourable Marke.
whilst we still...
Honourable Marke, will you take your seat, please?
Yeah, thank you.
Why are you rising, Honourable Member?
Yeah, he's misleading the House. He tells us about high panel
No,
commissions.
that's not the
but
point
he-
of order, Honourable Member.
It's misleading the House and the nation.
No, Honourable
Who
Member.
is chairing the committee? It's
That's
just
not
lies.
a point of order.
So you allow
That's a point
speakers to
for
come
debate.
and lie.
Let's allow the speaker to continue.
Lies.
Continue, Honourable Member.
The high-level panel is chaired by the previous president of this country. Chairperson, the constitution of this country as the supreme law of this land expects every citizen who is law-abiding to respect the law. The question then is, what does the Constitution expect from those that are not prepared to respect the law? Chairperson, law is law. It is either you respect the rule of law or you are a
Honourable
ruffian.
Marke, will you take your seat, please? Why are you rising, Honourable Member?
Honourable Marke is...
No. What is the reason? On which rule are you rising, Honourable Member?
Rule 31.
Rule 31. No, Honourable Member.
Honourable Marke is misleading this House.
No, you're taking a chance, Honourable Member.
He's misleading the public.
You must take your seat, please.
He is misleading the
Honourable
public.
Member, please take your seat.
The high panel is
I will
meant...
switch off your mic now. Continue, Honourable Marke.
Order, Chair.
I was just saying...
Honourable Marke, will you take your seat, please? Why are you rising, Honourable Member?
Chair, I'm rising on Rule 92 on the point of order.
What is the point of order, Honourable Member?
Honourable Marke is misleading this House about the panel is referring to.
Honourable Member, I have already ruled on this matter. And I am not going to entertain a point of order on a matter that I've ruled on. That's a matter for debate. Continue, Honourable Member.
Law is law. It is either you respect the rule of law or you are a ruffian, a ragamuffin, a criminal.
Order, Honourable
no
Members.
way in which the law can be respected selectively. No law can be justified if it is used selectively, especially if it is used to suppress or oppress one section of the citizen of the same country based on whatever criteria it may be used. There are laws that are universal under any type of a ruling system. If it is wrong to urinate on the pavement under the oppressive government, it will definitely still
Order,
be
Honourable
illegal
Members.
to do
Order.
so under a democratic government. If the law doesn't allow you to come to this parliament naked, so did it apply under apartheid. Inciting people to break the law and be violent and riotous under a democratic rule of this government is reckless and stupid. And stupidity in law can never be allowed and must never be allowed. Chairperson, why would a normal thinking person under a democratic, peaceful and stable government even try to do that? Only a person with crazy motives and with handlers that don't care about the stability of the country and its people can lead such a path. When we were fighting a violent regime, the aim was obviously not to be violent ourselves. But surprisingly enough, there will always be people who will make that their mission under the instructions of their handlers, of course. There will be Savimbi in the People's Republic of Angola. There will be Dlagama in Mozambique. There will be coup d'etats in El Salvador, in Argentina. There will be rebels in Nicaragua. There will be coups in Congo, etc. It usually happens where there were liberation movements who fought hard to win their freedoms. The question therefore will be, is South Africa different for the handlers? And who are they using? Chairperson, we are South Africans. United as the oppressed, we fought a bitter but just struggle against oppression, racist terrorism and violence of the apartheid system. And never again would we like to see that happening in our country. And whoever would like to try and bring our country into chaos will be crushed with all the might that we have as a democratic
Honorable Marke,
country.
will you take your seat, please?
Chair, we just need you to guide us here. What happens
what is the
when
point of
there's
order?
a suspect where the member is not sober and he's subjecting
honourable
us
member,
to debates that are not
honourable
relevant?
member.
No, but what must happen?
You are now reflecting on the
I'm
integrity of
not
the member.
drunk, and I'm not
Will you
talking
take your
about
seat, please?
order.
Take your seat, please.
On a point of order, Chairperson,
What is your point of order,
the
honourable
member
member?
is casting aspersions on the speaker to ask if he's sober.
I've dealt with the matter, honourable
Request
member.
that she withdraw it.
Continue, honourable Marke.
Chairperson, Honorable Maimane and his buddy, Honorable Malema, are not as stupid as they look. Whatever they've been doing so far has been systematic and well planned. Their aim, as we all know,
Honourable
bring down the democratic
Honourable
government of this country.
Honourable Marke, take your seat. Why are you rising, honourable member?
The member must withdraw the statement that he just made. He says, Honorable Malema and Honorable Maimane are not as stupid as they look. It means they look stupid, but they are not stupid as they look. He must.
Order, honourable member.
That's not.
Order. Honourable member, I will check the answer and I will come back with a ruling.
No, please come back before he finishes.
No, I'll come back with the
Because he
ruling.
must withdraw that. He cannot say our president
Take your
is
seat
stupid.
now, honourable member.
That is not allowed. That's
Take your
not,
seat
that's
now,
not
honourable member.
parliamentary.
Continue, honourable member.
It is convenient for some people in this house to try and claim Mandela as their own. When they quote him, they conveniently forget to tell us, all of us, that he was the first commander-in-chief of Mkondo.
Honourable Marke, will you take your seat? Why are you rising, honourable member?
I'm rising.
Order, honourable members.
I'm rising on Rule 31. Can we then assume that up until you make a ruling on the point of order that was raised just now, that anybody can call anyone to look stupid?
No, honourable member. Honourable member, I said I'll come back with a ruling.
Yeah, but up
And I
until
will
then,
take-
what
and
is
in
the...
doing
what is-
so, we check the context in which the member is also using it. We will come back with a ruling. Continue, honourable member.
Chair, Rule
Yes.
92.
Yes, honourable member.
No, according to your ruling.
Which rule?
92,
Yes.
point of order. So the procedure is that if you didn't hear the member, you were supposed to ask him first before you do your ruling.
No, honourable member.
So now we are going to call him stupid. You are going to call Jacob Zuma stupid.
Honourable member, take your seat, please. Honourable member, you must now conclude.
Honorable Kado quoted Jimmy Kruger in 1977. Whatever he did was it not to protect them? Must we be reminded that some people in this house at some stage were called Boss, Mrs., Clan Boss, and they never apologized to us. And they never apologized to this nation.
Honourable.
Why?
Order. Honourable Marke, your time has expired.
Chair.
Thank you.
May I address you?
No, I first want to take the member at the back.
No, Chair.
No, there's a member. There's a member behind you, honourable member.
Now that guy is finished, can we test him for alcohol? That drunk guy.
No, honourable member, you are out of order.
Now that is finished speaking.
You are
can we test him?
completely out of order. You are completely out of order. Honourable Maxon.
Okay.
Slope.
We'll deal with that. But I think there's a genuine issue.
Why are you rising, honourable member?
There's a genuine issue that what do we do as members if we legitimately suspect that a member is on the other side of sobriety?
No, honorable member, that is not, no, honorable member, let's not go that way. Because then we will really demean the status of this house if we start casting those type of aspersions. And remember, it can cut both ways.
Yes.
Right? It can cut both ways. Let us not go there. Let us deal with the debate and the motion that's in front of us in a way that is befitting to upholding the decorum of this house. Yes, honorable member?
Chair, exactly. Your last word. It's a very concerning that all of us here, we can come drunk in this parliament like this.
No, honorable member, you're repeating it. I've made a ruling. Please take your seat. I'm switching off your mic now.
Just test him.
The next speaker is the Honorable Madisha.
Thank you, Chair. Let me start by indicating that COPE supports the motion as here raised by Honorable Shibam. South Africa is a constitutional democracy. The constitutional democracy, which basically indicates that the land must be properly guided by it, and that which has to move forward, taking the people forward, is the Bill of Rights. Now, the Bill of Rights affirms universal democratic values of human dignity, equality, and freedom for all. Rights that were not afforded to most in apartheid South Africa. In fact, there were many laws in apartheid South Africa that promoted the opposite of our Bill of Rights. Those laws diminished the human dignity of the majority, made a minority more equal than the majority, and provided more freedom to the few and none to the millions of South Africans based on race. Our Bill of Rights requires that the state respect, promotes, and fulfills the rights set out in the Bill of Rights. As a constitutional democracy, any law or any conduct that is inconsistent with the Constitution is invalid. We therefore cannot have a government that enforces, uses, and/or uses, abuses, etc., the legislation that might be in violation with our Constitution. Neither can we have a government which is in any way subverting the rights and values set out in the Constitution. The government that we have, led by this party called the ANC, has actually taken us back. And that is why we say that that which is proposed has got to be taken forward so that we can have the whole thing corrected. Thank you very much.
Thank you, honorable member. You may leave the podium, honorable Madisha. It's fine. You are through now. The honorable Mbele.
From the outset, I think it'll be very useful to remind members in this House about a prime parliamentarian who served the people of this country, opposing and fighting many of the apartheid statutes we are discussing now, from the Group Areas Acts to the Population Registration Acts to the acts that disenfranchised colored voters. And of course, I speak of the indomitable Helen Suzman, who was a vanguard of the liberal tradition from which the DA draws inspiration, and we are proud to stand on her shoulders. And I remind you as well that the Progressive Federal Party, our predecessor, also opposed the reforms bringing through the tricameral parliament, and so it cannot be contended any other way. But from that example of a prime parliamentarian, we move to someone somewhat less stellar, who was at this podium earlier, the Honorable Make, who got two things wrong. Because firstly, the high-level assessment panel chaired by former President Motlanthe, number one, is looking at post-1994 legislation, not apartheid statutes. And secondly, it was in fact initiated by the Speakers Forum, not the President. Now, it's a long-observed phenomenon in political history that the oppressed can themselves become new oppressors, and in psychology, that sometimes the abused become abusers. Psychology also teaches us about Stockholm Syndrome, wherein a victim of kidnapping or hostage-taking starts to identify with their kidnappers and grows feelings of affinity and protectiveness towards their captors. When you combine these pathologies, you end up with a toxic mix of victimhood and insecurity that increasingly characterizes the securocrat-minded administration of President Jacob Zuma. Is it possible that during the ANC's long decades of fighting apartheid, it started subconsciously to become more like the enemy it despised, and the seeds of identifying with apartheid's conceptual and statecraft tools were planted? One has to wonder when you consider the examples raised by previous speakers in this debate, and in particular the manner in which the ANC government, over two successive administrations, has bungled the urgently needed repeal of the National Key Point Act. Virtually every line of the National Key Point Act was designed to ensure that the apartheid states could continue to rule with an iron fist and without transparency or accountability. That this act still exists today on our statute books is an indictment on our hard-won democracy. Indeed, when the act was passed in 1980, it was used to wage war against our people. The act was designed to reinforce the apartheid system and to give the apartheid Minister of Defense very broad authority to declare any place in South Africa a National Key Point Act. The responsibility of this act later transferred to the Ministry of Police, where it remains today. A byproduct of the wide ministerial discretion of the National Key Point Act is that it allows for our critical state infrastructure to become a hotbed for corruption and secrecy. This has been allowed through a number of problematic provisions in the law. Firstly, the list of national key points is not publicly available. Furthermore, the absence of these published lists prevents scrutiny of whether these national key points have been justifiably declared. Secondly, the minister is not required in the Act to declare the properties, so how on earth is one to know if one is breaking the law or not? These unconstitutional provisions make it easier for the executive elites to conduct corrupt and criminal activity under the veil of secrecy. This is precisely what happened in the early days of the Nkandla Gate scandal, when the act was used to justify the bearing of information relating to exorbitant expenditure of public funds used to upgrade President Jacob Zuma's private home at Nkandla. Now, last year, the DA reintroduced our Protection of Critical Infrastructure Private Members Bill to Parliament, which sought to repeal the outdated apartheid-era legislation that is the National Key Point Act. Last week, Thursday, was exactly a year to the date since the ANC squashed that private members bill, a move that could only be seen as deference to the executive and a negation of Parliament's autonomy as the lawmaking body of the land. The ANC used a flawed argument in rejecting the bill as undesirable based on the police minister's supposed intent to table his own bill soon. Indeed, Minister Ntleko was present at that portfolio committee meeting, and he promised that his critical bill, infrastructure bill would come before the committee by the end of 2016. Clearly, with less than a month left before Parliament rises for end-of-year recess, that is not going to happen, Dololo Bill. This is typical of the police minister: foot dragging, stalling, and dithering. As a result, the repeal of this oppressive law is delayed indefinitely. At best, it is laughable incompetence. At worst, keeping apartheid alive. The DA now wants to say to the ANC, we told you so.
Honourable member, your time is now expired.
Thank
you. The next speaker is the Honourable Bongo.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson. Fellow South Africans, the African National Congress in a month or so is going to be turning 105 years. In the 105 years of its formal formation in 1912, it has spent over 8 years fighting for the liberation of the people of South Africa. It has done so by ensuring that it deals with a lot of oppression which was caused by the predecessors of the Democratic Alliance. The ANC has been in government for the past 22 years. In 22 years, the ANC prides itself with the achievement it has done in terms of dealing with the repealing of legislation in this country. We have repealed over 200 legislation since 1994 as the African National Congress. And I would like to say this, that the motion that has been put today, it is indeed overtaken by events because Parliament and the executive has set up a high-level panel team, which is led by former President Kgalema Motlanthe, to look at key legislations and the progress we've made since 1994 in terms of repealing of legislations. So what I would like to say is that we have not, as opposed to what Honorable Shivambo has said, we have not neglected repealing of any legislation, including the one that is brought before this Parliament today by the EFF. In the 22 years that we have dealt with, I think here in Parliament what we have seen, and I'm surprised today that I see the alliance between the Democratic Alliance and the EFF is growing. This alliance is a fragile alliance. It's suffering from what Honorable Mbele says in psychology, cognitive dissonance. It is an alliance and a marriage made in heaven with a white man's burden. It will not last because this marriage, it's a marriage between a neoliberal right-wing fundamentalism and a far ultra-left dogma, which is doomed to fail. It is like spraying.
Order, Chair. Honourable Bongo, will you take your seat? Why are you rising, Honourable Member?
I rise on two rules. Rule 68 on the basis of the irrelevance of what the member is saying. And I'm also raising an order. If it does not have anything
Honourable
to say,
member,
it must not distort
that's not
the
a point of
the
order.
EFF. We have never
Well, you
come
take
here
your seat,
and declare
please.
alliance
I'm
with
switching
any
off your
party.
mic now.
So you must
Thank
not distort
Continue,
the
Honourable
EFF.
Bongo.
This marriage is like spraying people's faces with a doom, pretending that is Christianity. You see, last week when we were debating a motion of no confidence, there was an issue which was raised. An issue which was raised saying that people of the ANC are not going to be voting. They want to vote with their conscience. They are not going to support the motion, which was not true. The reason why the EFF could not take up seats of the coalition in the metros, it is because they still want to lie to the people of this country. They should have taken those seats in the metros so that they can uncover exactly who they are to the people of this country. So now, Honorable Chair, the Constitution of the Republic, Chapter 2, Section 7, says that this Constitution is the supreme law of the country. Any law inconsistent with it will be invalid. But the Constitution further states a procedure which we must follow in terms of wanting to deal with the legislation. Section 39, the interpretation clause, tells you that the Bill of Rights does not deny any existence of any other law, right, or freedom that is recognized or conferred by common law or customary law or any other legislation to an extent that is consistent with the Constitution. What does this require? it requires that if you have any other law which is inconsistent or you believe is inconsistent with the Constitution, you should then approach any competent court so that it can pronounce itself on that law that we have a problem with. So, in Schedule 6, if you can be able to read it, Schedule 6 of the Constitution further clarifies on what procedure must be followed. It says that all the laws that were existing before 1994 do not have necessarily a wider application. If you want me to explain to this, you must come to my office for a further lecture. But these laws do not have a wider application. What it means is that any law that is there, it must be subject. That's what Schedule 6 says, subject to amendment or consistency with the Constitution of the Republic. So it is very important that the EFF stays in law whilst we are dealing with issues that deals with repeal. You cannot today indicate left and turn right.
Honourable Member, your time is now expired.
Okay, thank you very much.
Next speaker is the Honourable Shavambu.
No, thank you very much, Chairperson. I think that today the mediocrity, the systemic mediocrity of the ANC was illustrated by all the speakers who came here. There's a topic here that speaks about the repeal of all apartheid legislation. The Minister of Justice comes, he speaks about the Righteous Assemblies Act only, and he defends it with passion. This is the law that criminalizes the Freedom Charter. The Freedom Charter is the only document that is constitutionalized in the ANC as the policy perspective that you stand for. It criminalizes the Freedom Charter, and then you say here that there's nothing wrong with the Righteous Amendment, the Righteous Assemblies Act. You must remember the Freedom Charter says that all shall have the right to occupy land wherever they choose. That clause comes from the Freedom Charter. The apartheid state increased its repressive character, its violent character after the adoption of the Freedom Charter. And part of the instruments legally to do so was the Righteous Assemblies Act, which we are defending today. Both the speaker who just left here and the other one whose sobriety is under question. They say that there's a high-level panel to deal with this issue that we are saying must be engaged in here, to repeal all apartheid legislation. It's all there. It's and that is not even established by a president, that high-level panel. It's established by the speaker to look into post-1994 legislation and look into issues of the so-called triple challenges and the land question as well, land reform. How far have we come with regards to that? That high-level panel is not dealing with apartheid legislation. If you did not know, please be informed today that Comrade Halima Mutante is not dealing with previous legislation, is dealing with legislation that was passed 1994. That is why we say that let us engage in a process now, a collective process of repealing all apartheid legislation. What is wrong with that? What is wrong? Why do you want to sustain the apartheid laws? The South African Law Commission says that it's actually more than 2,000 different pieces of legislation that have to be looked into. But you're not focusing on that. You're being negligent in terms of your political responsibility. That is why we have to stand up and say that the political power that has been given to the ANC is wrongly given because those who occupy the political power do not know what to do with it.
Honourable Shavambu, you just take your seat, please.
Yeah.
Why are you rising, Honourable Minister?
I just want to ask if the honourable member on the podium is willing to take a question.
Yes, I'm willing. Come.
Well, I just wanted to ask you, I accept your point that we should consider reviewing apartheid law.
What's the question,
Question, Masuta.
Should it be preceded by anarchy and violent behavior that you are propagating in the country? Is that how you want us to approach it?
Thank you, Honourable Minister.
The resolution, Minister Masuta, that you were supposed to debate, which you failed to debate, says there must be a committee that must repeal all legislation that was passed under apartheid and is inconsistent with the Constitution. That is what the resolution says, but it chose not to debate that. Why? Because you're obsessed with your political trial that you have initiated against the Commander-in-Chief of the EFF to charge him through an apartheid act of parliament. This is what we're supposed to be debating. So when we say there must be an ad hoc committee, it's to primarily deal with all apartheid legislation, not anarchy. The Freedom Charter says that we must occupy the land. And we call on all the people of South Africa to occupy the land if they find it anyway. If they find the land that is available, they must occupy it and use it meaningfully. There are many people already who have benefited from that land occupation program and were saying no surrender, no retreat, or going on with this particular program. But let us vote correctly on this issue. We have a process to repeal all apartheid legislation so that we can give guidance. Thank you very much.
Order, honorable members. Honorable members, that concludes the debate. I now put the motion. Are there any objections? There's objections, I'll put the question. Order. Those in favor will say aye. And those against will say no. I think the noes have it.
The EFF calls for division. We want to see the
a division, order, honorable member, a division having been called, the bells will be rung for 5 minutes. Order, honorable members, will you take up your seats now, please? Thank you. Order. Will you take up your seats, honorable members? Honorable members, will you take up your seats, please? I would like to remind members that they may only vote from the allocated seats, and when requested to do so, order, honorable members. Members must simply indicate their vote by pressing the appropriate button below the yes, no, or abstain signs. If a member inadvertently presses the wrong button, the member may thereafter press the correct button. The last button pressed will be recorded as the member's vote when the voting session is closed by the chairperson. The question before the House is that the motion as moved by the Honorable N.F. Shavambu be agreed to. Are all members in their allocated seats? Voting will now commence. Those in favor of the motion should press the yes button. Those against should press the no button. And those wishing to abstain should press the abstain button. Order, honorable members, order. Have all members voted? Thank you. The voting session is now closed. Order, honorable members, the result of the division is as follows. Those in favor, 86. Those against, 179. There's 8 abstentions. And the motion as moved by the Honorable Shavambu is thus negatived. It's not agreed to. The next item on the order paper is member statements. Yes, honorable member. Order, honorable members.
Chair, can the House place it on record that the ANC has just voted for the retention of apartheid laws? Thank you very much.
Order, honorable members. Is there any member of the ANC want to make a statement? The honorable member there at the back.
Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Honorable members, can you please settle down in the House? I can't even see the member who's moving the statement. Where's the honorable member?
Yeah.
Continue, honorable member.
The African National Congress welcomes the achievement of the DTI in winning the Global Sourcing Association's annual Outsourcing Destination of the Year award held recently in London. This investment award concretizes South Africa's investment position and will enable the sector to grow and continue to attract investments. As confirmed by Minister Rob Davies, South Africa's investment position presents a value proposition underpinned by high value, quality standards, relevant skills, potential to deliver complex and non-complex processes, and cost savings, which enhances our proposition for business process services globally. The reality is South Africa increased value beyond cost arbitrage. Investors are reporting positive operational effectiveness and revenue impacts. Since 2012, SA's offshore business process services marketed has experienced a compounded average growth of 25% a year on year, and now boasts 30,000 offshore jobs. Indeed, the UK is a leading buyer of SABP services, followed by Australia and the USA. South Africa...
Thank you, Honourable Member. Your time is now
Yes,
expired. The
thank
DA.
you.
Chair, health basics have not been fixed by the ANC government. Pregnant mums and children die unnecessarily. Hospitals in ANC-run provinces are broken. Not enough clinics are built in underserved areas. Ambulances arrive late or do not turn up at all. Nurse training is in paralysis. Not enough doctors are graduating from our medical schools. Instead of facing the basics, the health minister dreams about decentralized, bureaucratic professional training, a single number public-private more competitively priced medical aid, one platform of essential